Chapter 121, Creating the Fire Rune. Orion nodded his head and continued reading the pages before he soon reached the troubleshooting common rune creation errors. I will skip this for now, need fresh experience, he thoughtfully murmured. That's for the better, master. You need to have some experience yourself first before looking at the failures of others. He nodded and turned the pages back before reaching the primary runes. Now, let's see what I have. Saying that, he looked at the first page of the primary runes section, where the runes were divided into a few categories. Foundational function runes. Spell behavior and utility runes. Mental/sensory/soul-linked runes. Formation and field control runes. Core element runes. Advanced element runes. Top element runes. Now, which rune should I start with, Lil Lumi? All of them seem so interesting. He couldn't contain his excitement looking at the limitless possibilities placed in front of him. He had already begun imagining the various ways he could mix the runes and create spells with them. Yet there was nothing he could do with them except diligently learn. You should start with the fire rune, master. You'll need that to form your fire affinity rune after all. And it should be one of the easier ones for you due to your high affinity with it. Good enough, I shall start with that then. Saying that, he began turning the pages until the page for core element runes opened up in front of him. Lumi went silent to let him read the pages, anticipating how much time he would take to learn it. Orion's gaze carefully settled upon the page, the soft ambient glow of the mana lamps casting a gentle light upon the detailed illustrations. 3 runes were etched upon the first page, each inscribed with meticulous care, accompanied by descriptions detailing their essence and method of invocation. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes drifting over each rune slowly and calmly, taking in every intricate detail. The first rune was a twisting, fluid drop of water that appeared to ripple subtly as if alive, labeled as Water Rune. Embodies adaptability, fluidity, and tranquility. The rune of water upon which all water elemental spells are created. He continued to read further as more details were written about how to make it and how much mana to pour in. The second rune was solid, earthy, and geometric, with bold lines intersecting precisely and neatly, emanating an unmovable feeling. Beneath it, the text read clearly. Earth Rune. Symbolizes stability, endurance, and fortitude. The rune of earth upon which all earth elemental spells are created. But Orion's eyes sparkled brighter as they landed upon the third rune. The lines were flowing freely, almost as if someone had drawn the brush randomly, yet it seemed to exude the beauty of free will as the fiery rune seemed to dance with life. Fire Rune. Represents transformation, creation, and energetic destruction. Fundamental for spells involving combustion, heat manipulation, purification by flame, offensive strikes, or any fire-related spells. He inhaled slowly, his heartbeat accelerating slightly as a rush of excitement surged through him. The possibilities ignited his imagination, offensive power, swift attacks, blazing defenses. This rune seemed to resonate with him the best, despite his primal mana channels, solely due to his true dragon lineage within his veins. Master seems overly excited. Are you planning to set the entire mansion ablaze today? Lumi teased playfully. Or perhaps you'd like to volunteer as fuel instead? Orion teased, eyes flashing playfully. What do you think? Nua. Lumi refuses to be turned into barbecue. Oh. Chuckling lightly at her antics, Orion took a deep breath, mentally visualizing the rune. The instructions described the exact way the lines must flow, the precise manner to circulate his mana as he traced the rune, and the delicate balance required between visualization and intent. After memorizing every detail thoroughly, he reached forward and carefully positioned one blank parchment in front of him, dipping the fine brush gently into the shimmering mana-conductive ink. Alright, let's start, he thought determinedly. Slowly, he moved the brush, tracing the first line of the fire rune onto the parchment. As he continued drawing, he realized that this was the first time he had picked up a pen to write something in this life. Taking a deep breath, he continued, but due to slight distraction, he put a tad bit more mana, making the entire rune useless. Careful, master. If the flow breaks, the rune loses stability. Steady your mana. He exhaled softly, steadying his breath, and restarted the rune formation from scratch on a fresh parchment. This time, he steadied his hand and focused on the flow of his mana, making sure nothing went wrong as he slowly drew it. Master, you are forgetting the intent of fire. You need to focus not only on your mana but also on what you are drawing. Saw the novelfire.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. He paused, realizing that his rune seemed lifeless even if half-finished. Throwing the parchment aside, he let out a patient sigh and tried again. His third attempt was slightly better, the strokes were clearer, while his mana was steady as he slowly completed the rune. Boom! Another failure. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to. What went wrong? He carefully looked at the paper and compared it to the rune created in the book. He could clearly tell that his rune lacked power, as if it was missing something. You didn't try to incorporate your knowledge of fire that you've learned till now into the rune. Elemental runes are special, you need more than just skill to make them. That's why fire affinity runesmiths can only make fire elemental runes and need the help of other affinity users while making armaments. I see. I get it now. I think. Shaking his head, he threw aside his latest work and looked deeply at the rune in the book. He tried to learn its mysteries before picking up the pen again and dipping it in the mana-infused ink. Attempt after attempt passed by, each better than the last yet still insufficient. The rune either distorted slightly, lacked sufficient mana integration, or simply collapsed upon completion. By his sixth attempt, Orion felt his concentration intensify, his expression turning sharply focused, eyes narrowed in determination. He carefully guided the brush, letting his mana flow gently through his primal channels, visualizing each line before he executed the motion. The rune appeared near perfect, but at the final stroke, a slight wavering of his concentration caused a faint, unwanted ripple of mana. The rune glowed briefly as if about to be finished, but faded moments later. The fuck? Why am I losing concentration so often? My concentration isn't that weak, he said in frustration. Creating runes takes special focus, master. Your body and soul aren't trained yet to focus on creating runes, so it's harder for you at the start. As you practice more and gain more experience, you won't have this issue. He exhaled a long breath and nodded, then I'll just keep trying. Master, you're almost there. Don't lose hope. 7th time's the charm. Her bubbly encouragement filled him with renewed determination. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. When Orion reopened them, clarity filled his gaze. He dipped the brush again, visualizing the rune once more, this time aligning every fiber of his concentration toward the parchment. Chapter 122, Learning Runes. His mana circulated through his primal mana channels smoothly, harmonizing with his intent as he methodically formed each stroke. One line after another appeared on the parchment as he continued to create it with his full concentration. His mana continued to flow smoothly, imprinting the ink atop it as the rune slowly came to life. As he completed the rune's final curve, the symbol ignited brightly in a fiery crimson glow, humming with power. He infused more of his mana into the rune as the entire parchment began to burn fiercely. Orion exhaled softly, satisfaction filling his chest, though after a careful look he realized that while the rune might be stable, it still lacked the depth and power he'd seen in standard runes from the book's illustrations and other weapons. Wonderful, master. You did it. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to, but it could still be better. Your mana control needs more refinement to reach a proper standard rune. Orion nodded calmly, already feeling quite composed after one successful attempt. I know. Good isn't enough, I need it perfect. He looked towards the parchment, which slowly stopped burning after the mana he had infused in it emptied. His calm gaze slowly solidified with determination as he continued to pick up the next parchment and practice with it. Each subsequent attempt improved incrementally, until finally, after multiple painstaking tries, he achieved a fully formed, vibrant, and stable fire rune, one equal to the standard depicted in the book. He gazed upon it proudly, feeling a sense of deep accomplishment. His fingertips gently brushed over the dried symbol, feeling a soft warmth radiate gently from the parchment. Master's amazing. Truly the most talented dragon-human hybrid in the world. Orion chuckled lightly, basking momentarily in his small victory. It feels good. But I shouldn't get complacent. There are still so many runes to master. Wise words, master. So, which rune next? Something flashy again, perhaps lightning? Or maybe something practical like barrier? Orion flipped carefully back to the categorized section, eye scanning each rune thoughtfully. Learning a single rune to absolute perfection would slow me down. I should familiarize myself with several key runes first to get more experience. Good thinking. Versatility suits you better than mastery of just one rune. Master has a powerful advantage with the primal channels after all. Then I will learn the core elemental runes first. I don't know which other runes will be required for the affinity runes. After learning about them tomorrow, I'll practice those. Quickly considering his options, his gaze landed on the book again, scanning through the options. He paused at lightning rune. This one next, he murmured confidently. I just need to grind hard and learn all these runes. With more experience, learning new ones will become easier. Oh, that's a nice idea, master. Learning 2 of your highest affinities first will give you a good amount of experience while also allowing you to create the runes faster. He nodded, carefully reading through the details regarding the lightning rune written on the page. Its symbol was a crackling bolt striking from the top. He began carefully reviewing the description, absorbing every nuance about mana circulation, precision in visualization, and stabilizing energy streams. Orion knew it wouldn't be easy, but also not that hard due to his tier 7 affinity with the element. Even if the affinity didn't directly help with runes, it would still be helpful overall to create it. After reading it thoroughly, he picked up his pen again and took out a new parchment to begin again. Steadily, he failed and attempted again and again until he succeeded on his 9th try. He didn't try to rest and continued to learn the 3rd rune, wind. As the night deepened, one could see Orion's hunched figure sitting at the table in his room, discarding parchments one by one. Yet from time to time, he would laugh out loud in joy and place a parchment at the side before shoving himself back to work. He decided to learn all the core elemental runes in a single day, as he didn't know what the average others learned at, so he didn't want to disappoint himself. Little did he know others take days to weeks just learning a single rune, while all they had to do to pass the test was to master 5 runes in a month to form their affinity rune. But even if he knew, he wouldn't have cared about it, as the joy of learning new runes far surpassed what he had expected. He couldn't contain his excitement thinking about how many different spells he could make. Xianxia the Oval Fire. At website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. And so, he continued to learn till late in the night as his eyelids grew heavy due to exhaustion after forming so many runes in a single day. Master, you should rest now. Not yet. I need to try forming an advanced elemental rune. He groggily muttered, attempting to form the gravity rune for the 15th time. But you have already exhausted yourself so much. It's about time for you to sleep and try tomorrow. He finished before dropping on the table from extreme exhaustion. Master really overexerted himself. Rune creation doesn't just exhaust the mana but also the soul strength. Well, he is a true dragon. A good night's sleep should fix him up. Lumi muttered to herself, seeing Orion peacefully sleeping on top of the table. Normal people couldn't try to form a rune even 10 times in a single session due to the toll it took on their psyche and mana. Yet Orion had done that hundreds of times already, clearly demonstrating the monstrous reserve of mana and soul strength he had. The mana lamps began to die down on their own after Orion fell asleep, making the entire room glow with soft moonlight as Orion drifted off to a dreamless sleep. Knock knock. Good morning, master. It's morning already. Rena's cheerful voice came from outside as usual. Hearing her voice, Orion stirred slightly, Feeling rather sleepy, he slowly opened his eyes. The morning sunlight came directly upon his face from the windows, making him squint his eyes slightly. I slept on the table yesterday? Shaking his head slightly, he stood up and stretched his arms and back. Yeah, that hits the spot. Feeling better afterward, he headed for the washroom. After a short while, he came back. Come in. Saying that, he walked toward the bathroom as Rune and Fiora entered the room. Their eyes widened as they looked at the small mountain of parchment spread all around the table, some of them burned, some frozen, some sliced in pieces, among others. Did you have a battle here, Master? Rune asked speechlessly. Oh yeah, you can say that. He chuckled to himself, seeing their surprised look. Fiora picked up a parchment from the ground, seeing the intricate lines woven upon it. Master really worked hard in the night. Seeing him working so hard despite his absurd talent, her own determination to grow stronger with him strengthened. Alright, come. I need to take a bath, otherwise I would be late for the academy. I have some questions that I need to ask there today. They both looked at each other and followed after Fiora placed the parchment at a side table. Chapter 123, Arriving at the academy. The steam from the warm bathwater filled the spacious bathing chamber, softening the outlines of the luxurious marble walls and intricate runic carvings that lined them. Orion eased beneath the shower, releasing a contented sigh as the water soothed his tired muscles and revitalized his aching joints. Ah, this feels wonderful, Orion murmured, eyes half closing in satisfaction as the heat seeped into him, loosening the fatigue that had built up from his intense rune practice session last night. Rune gently laughed from beside him, her blonde hair cascading gracefully down her shoulders into the water. Her playful gaze flashed with amusement as she reached for the soap, filling her hands delicately. Master really overdid it last night, didn't he? That mountain of parchment, it looked like an entire group of mages had created runic papers in your room. Orion chuckled lightly, enjoying the gentle sensation of her hands drifting softly across his back, washing away his exhaustion along with the accumulated sweat from last night's intense practice. Perhaps a bit, Orion admitted laughingly, glancing back with a faint smile. But learning those runes, it was addictive. I couldn't help myself. Fiora shyly joined them, her curvy figure made the atmosphere slightly shift as she rolled her sleeves back and joined Rune, cleaning Orion's chest. Her timid eyes peeked up at Orion with admiration, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I thought. Master's runes looked very impressive. Even the mistakes were extraordinary. He chuckled, reaching out to gently pat Fiora's head, eliciting a bashful smile from her. Thank you, Fiora. Though I'm sure I can do much better next time. They continued bathing comfortably, the atmosphere filled with casual conversation and soft laughter. The pleasant scent of lavender soap mixed gently with the warm steam, creating an environment of serene tranquility. Finishing the bath, Orion stepped into the bathtub, or rather a small pond, before enjoying himself for a bit there. Fiora and Rune respectfully stood at the side, letting him rest. Afterward, Orion stepped out first, wrapping a luxurious towel around his waist as he moved toward the dressing chamber. Rune and Fiora diligently assisted him, selecting the academy uniform, their delicate fingers expertly arranging every detail. Fully dressed in his clean academy attire, Orion felt refreshed, feeling as if yesterday's fatigue was merely an illusion. Thanks for your help, Orion said warmly, smiling at both of them. You two should relax today, don't work too hard. Rune giggled softly, bowing playfully. Thank you, Master. We'll rest properly. Fiora shyly nodded, her quiet determination shining through her gentle demeanor. We'll be waiting for you to return. With one final smile, Orion left his room, heading directly to Seraph's quarters, eager to check on her progress. Arriving at the familiar door, Orion knocked gently before stepping inside, his gaze immediately softening as he found Seraph seated by the window again, the morning sunlight gently highlighting her porcelain-like features. Her soft green hair glistened faintly, catching his eyes as she turned to him with a quiet, yet more attentive look than the previous days. "Good morning, Seraph," Orion greeted gently, approaching slowly to avoid startling her. "How are you feeling today?" Seraph's gaze settled quietly upon him, the subtle shift in her usually distant eyes indicating growing awareness and recognition. While she remained silent, there was unmistakable acknowledgement in her gentle nod. Orion smiled warmly, pulling out a plate filled with moonberries from his inventory and setting it down beside her. "Eat up. You need your strength." He paused, noticing how her fingers twitched slightly toward the plate. This small gesture gave him great comfort. Gently, he sat across from her, quietly chatting about his experiences yesterday, sharing his excitement about rune creation and his plans for the day at the academy. "You know," Orion continued softly, "perhaps once you're feeling better, you can come outside and see the mansion grounds at the other end. There's a beautiful garden, Rena and Fiora often go there to relax. I'm sure you'd like it." For a brief instant, her eyes flickered with subtle curiosity before reverting to their usual quietness. Orion felt encouraged, small progress, yet deeply meaningful. "All right, I'll head out now. Take care, Seraph." Rising smoothly, he gave her an encouraging smile, noticing she'd already reached hesitantly for the berries. "Master. You are nearly finishing the first objective of the quest, gaining her trust. Steady progress, just trust the process." He inwardly smiled and exited the room. In the spacious dining room, Eldrick was already seated, quietly reading a scroll. He looked up as Orion entered, his eyes warm and welcoming. "Morning, Grandpa," Orion greeted warmly, quickly sitting down at his usual seat. Glancing at the empty seat beside him, he asked quietly, "Grandma still not back?" Eldrick sighed lightly, rolling up the scroll as the servants brought out steaming dishes of bread, eggs, and fresh fruits. "She sent word last night. She'll likely return tomorrow evening. The materials are rather challenging to procure." Orion nodded understandingly, taking a bite of the freshly baked bread. "Well, it's Grandma we're talking about. I'm sure she'll manage." Eldrick chuckled softly, pride evident in his tone. "Indeed she will. Anyway, how was your rune practice last night? Lucan said you nearly emptied one of our parchment stores." Orion laughed sheepishly, brushing the back of his head. "I may have gotten carried away, but I did learn quite a bit." Eldrick nodded approvingly, eyes twinkling. "That's the spirit, lad. Just remember to pace yourself. You don't want to collapse again. As for the expenses? Leave that to your old man." He patted his chest proudly. Orion chuckled and nodded, "Indeed I will." They continued their breakfast comfortably, exchanging small talk until Orion finished his meal, standing after eating his fill. "I should head out now, Grandpa. I have quite a few interesting questions for the instructors today." Eldrick nodded in understanding, giving Orion a playful smile. "Good luck. And don't beat up some nobles for no reason." Orion chuckled and waved, stepping outside where Lucan and Edgar awaited him. Lucan was leisurely tossing his familiar pebble, casually catching it as he spotted Orion approaching. He quickly bowed and playfully asked, "Ready, young master? Did you dream of runes last night?" Orion rolled his eyes, chuckling. "I dreamed about beating up some crass carriage driver." Edgar chuckled at his words and lightly bowed, "Good morning, young master." Orion nodded appreciatively, climbing in comfortably. Lucan swiftly took his place, and Edgar sat in front of Orion in the carriage. Arriving at Thunder Peak Academy, Orion showed his student badge at the gate, swiftly passing the magical scans. He entered inside and wandered leisurely across the bustling academy grounds, observing the slightly tense atmosphere. Students chatted in groups, laughing or discussing the test that the new year would have to take. Eventually, near the same bridge as the last time, he spotted familiar figures, both Arya and Amelia, chatting casually while looking at the fountain. Xianxia the novel, F.ir.at website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Arya noticed him first, waving cheerfully. "Morning, brother Orion. You look especially energized today." Something good happened? Orion chuckled, approaching them. You could say that. I studied the primary rune book and found it to be fascinating. Arya giggled, that's how I felt when I first saw it. All those runes, with their infinite potential. Isn't it addicting? I spent a whole night reading the entire book that day. Chapter 124, Affinity Rune Theory. Orion raised an eyebrow. You took a day to read the book? Amelia looked at him weirdly. Arya shook her head. It's already good that I was able to read the entire book in a single day. After all, you exhaust yourself while reading those runes and understanding the intricacies. I see. I underestimated myself. CTH Novelfire.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Hehe Master finished the entire book in one night and learned all the core elemental runes. Wanna tell her? She might blow her top, Kiki. Oh. He looked at Arya with interest and said, I read the entire book in the night today. It was quite interesting. Arya blinked, clearly taken aback. All of it? In one night? You're joking, right? Amelia stared at Orion, eyes widened slightly in surprise and admiration. Orion shrugged nonchalantly. It was an enjoyable read. Anyway, I wanted to ask, are there classes today on affinity rune formation and spell creation? Arya quickly nodded, regaining her composure. Yes, actually. That's exactly what's scheduled for today. You planning to attend? Orion's eyes brightened immediately. Definitely. That's precisely what I'm here to learn. Arya laughed softly, clearly amused. You really don't hold back once you set your mind to something. Amelia smiled faintly and nodded, clearly agreeing with Arya. Orion chuckled, shaking his head. The feeling of progress is addicting. Let's hurry, we don't want to miss anything important. The three walked briskly toward the imposing main building of Thunder Peak Academy, its polished obsidian walls towering majestically under the soft glow of the morning sun. Passing through the tall, mana-engraved entrance gates, Orion felt the atmosphere subtly change after entering. Inside, the noise and bustling activity of students moving hurriedly through the spacious halls was mixed with a subtle tension from the commoners who hadn't yet formed their runes. I wonder how many of them will fail. Shaking his head, he decided to ignore that for now. Arya guided Orion and Amelia confidently through the busy hallways, eventually reaching the large lecture hall dedicated to affinity spell theory. The doors opened effortlessly, welcoming them into a wide, crescent-shaped auditorium filled with seats arranged in neat tiers around a central platform. Orion paused momentarily at the entrance, his eyes swiftly scanning the expansive room. The first row at the very front was clearly separated, 10 pristine seats glowing faintly with soft mana illumination, symbolizing their exclusivity reserved for the Academy's most outstanding students for the year. A few seats among them remained empty, while several others were occupied by figures Orion had seen previously, probably running late or not attending at all. Among them, Orion immediately spotted NYSS, her graceful figure seated elegantly with confidence, silently reading a thick, rune-etched tome placed comfortably on her lap. Her flowing dark hair framed her quiet expression, subtle and composed as always. Orion smiled inwardly, walking purposefully forward toward his seat in the front row. Arya and Amelia followed just behind him, gracefully taking their places beside him. Without hesitation, Orion seated himself comfortably beside NYSS, who briefly raised her gaze, locking eyes with him before offering a slight, acknowledging nod and returning to her silent reading. He relaxed in his seat, the soft cushions comfortable and subtly mana-infused, likely designed to ease the mental strain of prolonged magical study for young awakeners. His thoughts drifted momentarily to the runes he had learned painstakingly throughout the night, anticipation sparking gently within him. His mind brimmed with questions, and a hunger for deeper understanding swelled in his chest. After several minutes of waiting, during which students gradually filled the remaining seats, a dignified yet approachable man strode onto the central platform, immediately capturing everyone's attention. His neatly combed hair framed calm yet perceptive blue eyes, and he had a gentle smile as he looked at the students. He wore elegant robes embroidered subtly with rune patterns, clearly indicating his mastery in affinity spell theory. The auditorium quieted down respectfully as he faced them, his voice warm yet authoritative as he began speaking. Good morning, students. For those who do not yet know me, I am Instructor the Lion. I specialize in affinity spell theory and basic spellcraft. Today, we'll explore how to effectively form your first affinity runes, and delve into the core principles behind crafting spells that resonate with your elemental affinity. His gaze swept across the auditorium, briefly settling appreciatively on the students in the first row, his eyes momentarily pausing on Orion before continuing confidently. Affinity runes, Instructor the Lion began, voice steady yet filled with genuine passion, are far more than just foundational symbols. They define the essence of your relationship with mana and your chosen elements. Your first affinity rune will greatly determine the strength, stability, and flexibility of your future spells. He paced slowly, emphasizing his words, hands gesturing fluidly. When forming your affinity rune, you'll typically select several primary runes as building blocks. Each affinity rune will generally be composed of at least 3 primary runes, often more. For beginners, simplicity is key. Mastering a smaller set first ensures greater stability and control. The students listened attentively, many taking notes rapidly on parchment, their eyes bright with curiosity. The lion paused briefly, smiling softly. Before I continue, are there any initial questions regarding affinity rune formation or primary rune selection? Immediately, several hands rose eagerly, Orion's among them. Instructor the Lion smiled warmly, gesturing toward Orion first, recognizing him from the recent duel that had sparked discussion among the instructors. Yes, Orion? Your question? Orion sat up straighter, eyes focused seriously. Instructor, what specific primary runes would you recommend to form a fire affinity rune? Instructor the Lion nodded appreciatively, pleased with the direct, practical inquiry. Excellent question. A strong foundational fire affinity rune typically incorporates the fire rune as its core, naturally. But it is strongly recommended to include supplementary runes like Stabilize to trigger and intensify flames, and Flow to ensure smoother mana circulation. Advanced users might also include Amplify or Stabilize depending on their intended specialization, offensive or balanced control. But Fire, Ignite, and Flow are 3 of the core runes. Orion nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the information. The combination sparked inspiration in his mind, opening up countless potential strategies as he decided to master some of these primary runes today instead of the advanced elemental runes. Next, Arya gracefully raised her hand, eyes glinting with curiosity. The lion smiled, nodding toward her. Yes, Arya? Instructor, how many runes would you advise for the initial affinity rune formation? She asked clearly, her voice confident and measured. Instructor the Lion nodded approvingly. For common people, they form their affinity runes with 3 runes. And the common students of our academy form their affinity rune with 5 runes. And those truly top-tier geniuses of our academy form their affinity rune with at least 6 to 7 primary runes. Each additional rune exponentially increases complexity. So only the geniuses who can handle the load try for more runes. Arya smiled appreciatively, clearly satisfied with the response. Several more students asked questions, covering aspects ranging from rune stability, mana circulation intricacies, to how elemental affinities could influence rune selection. Each question received thoughtful, detailed responses from Instructor the Lion, the clarity and patience of his explanations making the atmosphere lively and highly engaging. When the questions finally subsided, the Lion smoothly resumed his lecture, elegantly outlining the process of forming affinity runes, from initial visualization to precise mana manipulation. Orion attentively listened, diligently imprinting each detail into his memory. His understanding of the complex relationships between primary runes deepened significantly, providing him clarity regarding mistakes he'd made during yesterday's practice. As the lecture concluded, Instructor the Lion offered another round of questions. Orion quickly raised his hand again, his gaze filled with curiosity. Yes, Orion? Instructor, the lion called once more, eyes flashing with interest. Orion leaned forward intently. Instructor, regarding spell creation, how many spells can a Tier 1 Awakener hold in their sea of consciousness? Chapter 125, End of Class. Thalion nodded his head in appreciation. That's a good question. Most don't consider it and only think about how one can create an affinity rune. So to answer that, a normal Tier 1 Awakener can hold up to 3 Tier 1 spells in their sea of consciousness. The more spells you have, the greater the load it will place on your SOC. Orion thoughtfully nodded and became silent, letting the others ask questions. Elias, who had been silent throughout the lecture, raised his hand. Thalion's gaze shifted towards him. Elias Marrow, yes? What question do you have? Elias sat up straight and said in a calm and composed tone, aren't 3 spells too little? How many spells can higher tier awakeners hold? Another good question. The lion nodded his head. As I just said, a first tier awakener can hold up to 3 spells, and with each consecutive level, the number of spells one can hold increases by 3. So a tier 9 awakener can hold up to 27 spells. The students began murmuring upon hearing this, the commoners among them discussing it the most. Only 27 spells? Isn't that too little? I thought we'd be able to use hundreds of spells by then. As the discussion continued, the lion gave the students some time before he lightly coughed, his mana suppressing the room, silencing everyone. Now, let's continue. While an awakener can only hold 3 spells at tier 1, that doesn't mean he can't learn more spells. However, to use those spells, he would need to create the rune in the air on the spot. Otherwise, the spells he has already stored in his SOC can be activated with merely a word. And if your mastery is good enough, then just the name of the spell is enough to activate it. The students' eyes lit up. This was much better than what they had initially thought. But soon, many realized the difficulty of creating a magic circle mid-battle. Search *the Nelfer.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Orion, however, thought of something else. Spell limit, huh? Wonder what my limit will be. Your sea of consciousness is so ridiculously huge that you'd need to master hundreds of spells before we can get an estimate. He inwardly smirked and replied, only one way to find out. I need to create more spells in my SOC due to my different elements. The students continued discussing for a while before one of the nobles from the back row raised his hand. The lion nodded and gestured for the student to ask their question. I wanted to ask, once we've formed our affinity rune, how do we determine the optimal spells to practice initially? Thalion's expression turned deeply thoughtful. A wise question. Initially, focus on basic yet versatile spells directly related to your affinity rune's chosen runes. For instance, with a fire affinity rune containing ignite and flow, I'd recommend starting with simple combustion spells or minor flame control techniques. Such spells help reinforce your rune's stability and deepen your intuitive grasp of mana manipulation and elemental familiarity. The noble student nodded and scribbled something in his rune book. After a few more questions, the lecture officially ended, and the students gradually dispersed, chatting energetically amongst themselves about the intriguing new knowledge. Arya nudged Orion gently, smiling. Got the answers to your questions? Orion chuckled warmly, his eyes brightly lit up. Yep, all of them. I've got plenty to try tonight. Amelia glanced at him, admiration subtly visible in her eyes at Orion's hunger for knowledge and enthusiasm. Arya giggled and stood up. Well, I also need to head back. I feel like I'm close to reaching the 2nd tier of the awakening stage. Orion raised an eyebrow. Already? Aren't you a little genius? He chuckled and stood up. She brightly smiled and pointed a finger at the other noble heirs. Hee, I can't fall behind the other geniuses when I'm the princess of the country. However, Orion saw something hidden within that smile of hers, pressure. A huge pressure that someone might surpass her, and she would disappoint not only her parents but also those who put their hopes on her. He smiled and didn't mention anything, softly nodding. Indeed, but you don't have to worry about it. Arya tilted her head. What do you mean? Orion cracked a grin and pointed at himself. Because I will soon be surpassing you. Arya stared at him for a few seconds with a blank expression before bursting out laughing. Ha 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 ha, true, with your talent, you might really surpass me. But first, form your affinity rune, lest Beistine Hargan throw you out in a month. Well, just give me another day. I should be able to form it by tomorrow, he inwardly thought, wondering how she would react if he told her about it. As they prepared to leave, Orion briefly glanced towards the other top 10 students who had attended. Sylvia and Garen were missing, while the rest had attended. His gaze paused on Elias for a bit before continuing, landing on NYSS, who remained seated quietly with a thoughtful expression on her face. Seeing him looking at her, she nodded. You asked good questions, Orion. Orion nodded back. Thanks, I learned a lot today. She stood up. Then I will leave for the Tower of Myths. Saying it curtly, she slowly walked away. Oh? She's already going for the Tower of Myths? That's bold of her, Arya said, a hint of admiration in her eyes. Orion nodded. She should already be at the second tier of the awakening stage then. She's older than me. Arya quickly interjected. His lips twitched. Did I say she surpassed you? Her cheeks turned slightly red as she turned around. Cough. Anyways, I'm heading back, I need to prepare for my breakthrough. Emilia gently smiled, seeing her behave like this, before giving Orion a nod and following after her. After leaving the main building, Emilia caught up with Arya. You're really open with him, Lady Arya? Huh, how many times have I told you? Just call me Arya when it's just the two of us, Arya shook her head and softly berated her. Emilia swung her spear around. We're in the academy. Right, I forgot about that. Softly exhaling, she nodded. As for your previous question, yes, I'm indeed friendly with him. I've known him for over a month now. Mom and Dad went to visit Grandpa Eldrick and Grandma Celine when I first met him. Emilia's eyes lit up, taking a step forward. She asked with shining eyes, did Sir Eldrick and Lady Celine say anything about him to His Majesty? Arya shook her head. No. Father only told me that Grandpa Eldrick fully trusts Orion. The two of them continued chatting while heading toward a flying carriage parked at a particular corner of the academy. At the other end of the academy, Orion went toward the cafeteria and bought some porridge and other fruits for Seraph before heading back. Outside the academy, he spotted Lucan staring at a group of ladies passing by while playing with his pebble, and Edgar stood on one side, cleaning his sword. Noticing him, they bowed, and after a small chat, prepared the carriage. Orion boarded first before the others followed as the carriage began rolling down the street. Chapter 126, Mastering Runes. Edgar, sitting opposite to Orion, took out a ring from his hand and extended it towards Orion. Young master, here are the other parchments and mana ink for your training. I heard from Lucan that you had requested it, so I bought a few from the city. Hee, I thought he was proposing, master. Ignoring Lumi, Orion gratefully accepted the storage ring. Thanks, Uncle Edgar. I was just getting short of them as well. With a smile, he scanned the storage ring, only to get shocked. Inside, a few small mountains made out of parchment stood majestically. Raising his head, he speechlessly looked at Edgar. Did you empty the entire royal capital? Edgar burst out laughing at his words. Haha, surely you jest, young master. I only bought a few for you. Tell me once they run out. Shaking his head, he wore the ring and looked outside the window, wondering which runes he would learn today. The carriage swiftly rolled past establishments and estates of the second ring before quickly approaching the Hellstorm estate. We're here, young master. Lucan's voice came from the front. Orion and Edgar stepped down from the carriage before Lucan took it away to park at the stable. Ready for another round of training, young master? Edgar cracked his knuckles. Orion smirked and nodded. Of course. How can I back down from that? Saying that, both of them headed to the training ground. Orion picked up his wooden longsword and began his training as usual before sparring with Edgar. After finishing his training, he went towards his room, exhausted, to take a bath, which Rune and Fiora had already prepared. After some chatting and relaxation, he came out and went towards Seraph's room. Rune and Fiora went to do their own things as he knocked on Seraph's door. Entering inside, he saw that she was sitting at a different table this time with an empty plate. Smiling lightly, he went ahead and sat down in front of her, sharing the new things he had learned while also giving her the porridge and fruits he had prepared for her. Soon after, he stood up and left, leaving a hungry elf staring at the food. He went for dinner later, but Celine had still not returned. After eating while chatting with Eldrick, he returned to his room, closed the door, and went back to sit at the table beside the window. Now, it's time to learn some more runes, he said with an excited smile on his face. What runes are you planning for your fire affinity rune, master? Orion took out the primary runes book and flipped open to the foundational function runes page. Since the teacher said that normal students can make an affinity rune with 4 to 5 runes, and top-tier students with 6 to 7 runes, I should try with at least 8 to 9, right? He rubbed his chin while muttering. Lumi speechlessly heard him muttering. Are you sure? All those who made 6 to 7 runes have been learning runes for like a decade. On the other hand, you haven't even learned runes for a day. Well, it's not like I'm taking a risk here. I'll only do it after I'm thoroughly prepared and have good control over rune creation, he said. That's true. So which runes? These, he pointed towards the runes one by one. Fire controls flame, heat, combustion, and burning force. Flow controls the direction of mana or elemental movement. Stabilize prevents rune or spell structure from breaking. Amplify increases intensity, power, or range of an effect. Ignite triggers combustion or elemental ignition. Search the novelfire.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Focus improves spellcasting precision and mental clarity. Contain holds a spell or force within a specific area. Reinforce strengthens structure, durability, or resistance. Channel maintains continuous mana flow to a spell or item. Seems good. You can use a few of these runes when making other affinity runes as well, like channel, reinforce, focus, among others. He nodded and went back to the page of flow. Well, I should focus on learning these runes for now. Seated at his wide desk, Orion leaned slightly forward, his fingers tightly gripping the mana-infused brush. His eyes sharpened with focus, locked on the open page of the primary rune book where the symbol for flow was displayed, its vivid curves and loops seeming to move like water under his gaze. Okay, master, take it slow. You already succeeded once yesterday. You just need to replicate the process cleanly now. I've got this, Orion replied silently, dipping his brush into the mana-conductive ink and carefully lowering it onto the parchment. His mana flowed gently through his primal channels, smooth and stable. With every stroke of his brush, he layered his mana over the ink in synchronized pulses, letting the rune take shape not just on the paper, but in his mind as well. Within 3 attempts, the flow rune blazed softly with a clean azure glow, stable and precise. Orion's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Much better than yesterday. Hee, of course. Master's practically a natural. Wasting no time, he turned to the next one, stabilize. The rune was composed of steady, angular loops, meant to signify the structural integrity of mana. His first attempt flickered briefly before dissipating, but on the second try, he managed to maintain its glow. By the time he completed Amplify, Ignite, and Focus, he had entered a focused rhythm. Each rune, while unique, followed its own logic, its own melody in the grand world of mana. Orion read them like sheet music, pausing, absorbing, replicating. He laughed softly to himself after finishing Contain, shaking off the slight ache in his hand. You're on fire today, master. Wait, literally too. Asterisk greater than over equal to less than over equal to. I haven't even started the fire rune again, he replied dryly, rolling his wrist. Then came Reinforce, a powerful foundational rune with heavier lines. Its effect, when triggered, caused the parchment to momentarily harden like stone before fading. Orion's smile widened. This would be incredibly useful in weapon enchantment. Or spell durability. Imagine casting a fireball that doesn't scatter easily under pressure. Finally, channel. Orion focused deeply as he visualized a consistent flow of mana looping endlessly through a conduit. On his second try, the rune stabilized with a smooth golden hue, pulsing like a beating heart. He leaned back for a moment, exhaling slowly, stretching his arms above his head. 8 runes. All successfully learned in one night. Now, let's see how well I actually remember them. Orion pulled out a fresh set of parchment sheets and began again, not to learn, but to engrave from memory. One by one, he drew the runes he had just learned, comparing their glow, their structure, and their mana resonance to the ones in the book. Fire. Flow. Stabilize. Amplify. Ignite. Focus. Contain. Reinforce. Channel. He repeated the sequence again. Then again. Then again. Dozens to over 100 parchments were covered in glowing runes, some brighter than others, some slightly unstable, but all valid. The room was filled with a dimly shifting rainbow of magical lights, each rune humming faintly, a clear sign of effort and understanding. His hand cramped. His shoulders ached. But Orion's expression was one of wild joy. The edge of the parchment fluttered as he made another stroke. But this time, the ink trailed off midline. His brush dropped softly from his fingers. Eh? Master? Orion had slumped forward against the desk, eyes closed, breath steady. Exhaustion finally caught up to him. He fell asleep, again. Lumi sighed, a fond smile in her tone. You silly overachiever. You're not normal. And thank goodness for that. Chapter 127, Return the next morning, the sun rose high as the sunlight came directly on his face through the window's curtains. Stirring slightly, he slowly woke up. Sitting up straight, he stretched his arms above his head. Good morning, Master. You woke up earlier than yesterday. Yeah, might be my body adapting to my sleep schedule. He stood up and went to the washroom before Rune and Fiora came for the daily bath. They were still amazed by the amount of parchments on the ground, which seemed to have only increased from yesterday. Afterwards, he went to visit Seraph and talked with her as usual, giving her some breakfast. After a while, he stood up and bid her farewell before heading toward the dining room. Will you create your affinity rune today, Master? Orion rubbed his chin with a thoughtful expression. I'm still undecided about that. I still need to practice the mana circuits and runic inscription that would be required for the affinity rune. Sar the Nelfer.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Well, it's only been 2 days, Master. No need to rush. Take your time. He chuckled and nodded before soon reaching the dining hall. Opening the door, he saw that Eldrick was seated in his usual spot. Still not here, huh? Shaking his head slightly in disappointment, he entered inside. Good morning, Grandpa. Haha, good morning, lad. You look lively today, what happened? Eldrick greeted and laughingly asked. He came forward and took his seat before rubbing the back of his head and proudly saying, Haha, nothing much, I just learned all the runes for my affinity rune yesterday. Eldrick raised an eyebrow. Huh? Already? Hasn't it been like 2 days since you got the book? Orion proudly looked at him and nodded. Yes, and I learned all the runes that I decided upon. Oh? Eldrick curiously looked at him and asked, so, how many runes did you decide on? 7? Haha, Orion laughed at his estimate. Don't underestimate me, Grandpa. I decided to make my rune with 9 primary runes. Eldrick's eyes widened in shock. Huh? Brat, don't bite off more than you can chew. I haven't heard of anyone creating their affinity rune with more than 8 runes. See? Someone has already formed 8 runes, so the least I can do is 9, right? Orion shook his head and said. He had already expected that someone might have formed 8 runes, since the top students in the academy could already form 7. Eldrick stroked his beard. With your talent, it's not inconceivable that you will do it. So when will you form your affinity rune? I thought of forming it today, but I need to practice the mana circuits and runic inscription for the rune. Should I do it in the evening? He asked. Eldrick shook his head. No, don't take the risk. Spend the entire day practicing and try different ways, like increasing the flow of mana or decreasing it. Also, try to form the entire affinity rune on parchment. Even if it will be useless outside the sea of consciousness, it is good for practice. Alright, Orion nodded in understanding. I'll do that then. Anyway, enough about that. Did Grandma send back any news? Eldrick shook his head. No news as of yet. That old hag is probably out gaff. Who are you calling an old hag, you damn old bastard? Boom. The dining room's door burst open as Celine entered with an angry expression on her face. Why you? We decided not to speak so crassly in front of Orion, he angrily said. And who started it, you bearded bastard? She stepped toward him as both of them stood at arm's length. They continued bickering as Orion looked at them speechlessly. The two of them really can't live a few days without bickering. He inwardly chuckled, yet his heart warmed seeing Celine back after a few days. Good morning, Grandma, he softly said, deciding to interfere here and stop their argument. Celine turned her head and walked toward him. Good morning, dear. It feels like forever since I last saw you. Saying that, she gave him a hug and patted his head. It's only been a few days, Grandma, Orion softly said. It might have only been a few days for you, but it feels like years have passed for me. She gently broke the hug, patting his head as she made him sit down in his chair and sat beside him. Now, what's for breakfast? It's been a few days since I've had breakfast with my dear grandson. Eldrick smilingly shook his head and sat back down. So, did you get all the materials for his sword? He asked. Celine gave him a side glance. Do you think I'm as incompetent as you? Of course I got all the elements. I will forge his sword tomorrow. Orion nodded his head. Yes, Grandma should rest today. You've been out for a few days. Oh, my dear, Grandma will rest later. It's because I had Edgar fix the mansion's smithy since it hasn't been used in forever. Glancing back at Eldrick, she continued, someone didn't even bother to think about getting the smithy cleaned and only focused on stuffing his face with food. Cough. Eldrick's face turned slightly red with embarrassment. It slipped my mind, really. Otherwise, I would have had it cleaned. Of course it did. Shaking her head, she turned back to Orion as they chatted while eating their breakfast. The breakfast passed peacefully as Orion chatted for a while with Celine after finishing, sharing his recent deeds and also telling her about his primary rune learning progress, but didn't tell her about the core runes that he had learned. After finishing up with them, he got up and headed toward his room, deciding to practice the creation of the affinity rune properly this time. The moment Orion stepped into his room, he closed the door behind him with a soft click, shutting out the world and sealing himself away to focus on learning the affinity rune. The air still carried the faint scent of mana-conductive ink as his nose twitched, smelling it. A couple hundred used parchments lay in organized piles near the window, glowing faintly with faded runic remnants, witnesses to his past 2 days of sleepless nights. He stretched his shoulders slightly and walked toward the desk, his expression calm yet holding a slight hint of excitement. Today wasn't about learning new runes. It was about constructing something far more significant. His affinity rune. The first step to truly leaving his mortal self behind and walking the path of awakeners. He would finally have the superpowers that he saw and read about in his last life. It's about to begin, isn't it, Master? The first big step of your path as a true awakener. And just in time, Grandma's forging you a sword tomorrow. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Orion chuckled, amused. Yeah, and I'd rather forge the rune quickly so I can try more things with the sword. He sat down at his wide desk and pulled out a pristine stack of parchment alongside a few crystal vials of mana ink Edgar had gifted him. But you'll need to remaster that sword. Its weight won't be something you're already familiar with, after all. Chapter 128, Practicing Forming Affinity Rune doesn't matter, I already have learned the basics thoroughly. I won't spend long getting used to the weight, especially when the current sword feels too light. Well, who told you to have such a strong physique? Even if you aren't in your dragon form right now, the dragon blood is passively enhancing your physique, making you much stronger than the average awakener of your level. I can't wait to undergo metamorphosis and become a juvenile dragon, he said with a smile. It won't be long, master. Only a few decades if you undergo the usual growth of a dragon. He decided to just ignore her and focused on the rune. Yes, the reason I'm learning the spells and cultivation the human way is because of the absurdly long time dragons take to mature. Shaking his head, he picked up the brush and murmured, "Time to get serious. Master, remember the structure. Don't rush. First comes the origin glyph, but you don't draw that manually. It's formed instinctively inside your sea of consciousness." That part, I'll leave to the actual affinity rune formation when I'm ready to engrave it into my sea of consciousness, Orion muttered, narrowing his eyes as he pulled another parchment forward and uncapped a vial of ink. For now, he would focus on the structural layer, the second phase of the rune construction. His hand moved with confidence, the brush drawing a perfect circle that filled most of the page, representing the spherical frame that would encompass the origin glyph in the center. Then, he began placing the primary runes. One by one, he carefully scribed them around the perimeter of the circle, each rune positioned at a specific interval, equidistant and balanced in alignment. Fire, flow, stabilize, amplify, ignite, focus, contain, reinforce, and channel. 9 runes, each glowing faintly as he finished their formation, forming a complete constellation of runes and elemental authority. But in the sea of consciousness, he would need to engrave the runes all around the spherical orb. He decided to practice on the two-dimensional layer first. Ooh, it's so symmetrical. So pretty. Just like me. Greater than over equal to 4 all less than over equal to. Orion chuckled faintly, I wouldn't be able to look at it if it was as pretty as you. Shaking his head, he focused entirely on the next step, constructing the mana circuits, fine interconnecting pathways that would guide his mana between the runes and allow them to harmonize together as a unified system. He dipped his brush again and carefully began sketching the mana threads. Each circuit glowed faintly with his mana's pulse, weaving intricate lines from fire to everything and flow to stabilize to reinforce, linking each rune to its logical partner. Flow supported channel. Amplify fed into ignite. Focus connected to every rune with gentle precision, sharpening the spell intent. By the time he completed the interlinked web, it resembled a complex array of magical veins, like a nervous system that pulsed softly with restrained power. Beautiful. Now the runic language, master. Inscribe the operational logic. That determines how it behaves when mana is fed in. Mana cost, casting speed, efficiency, this is what separates an apprentice's rune from a true mage's. Orion nodded, pulling another brush with an even finer tip. Around the circular web of mana circuits, he began inscribing smaller glyphs in runic language, same as what is used to write the runes, but not the primary runes. He wrote the sigils for mana efficiency, casting delay, sustained output, control threshold, and others. It took nearly half an hour, his brushwork unwavering, his gaze sharp as a blade. When he finally finished, he leaned back, letting the ink dry. The entire structural layer was complete, his chosen runes, their connections, and the intent encoded around them. Damn, even just this would take weeks for most students. He smiled to himself. Of course. But you're not most students, master. You're built different. He allowed himself a small exhale before preparing for the final step, the formation layer. This step wasn't just drawing. It was about forming a barrier, a shell, that encapsulated and activated the rune. In a real affinity rune, this layer would bind the origin glyph to the structure, forging a living connection between the mage and the element itself. Using a broader brush this time, Orion began painting a translucent, semi-spherical globe around the rune circle. The ink shimmered faintly, and his mana seeped into it like wind into grass. As the globe closed at the top, he paused, channeling his mana inward, then downward, mentally placing the imaginary origin glyph at the core of this three-layered construct. The origin glyph wasn't drawn. It would be born later, inside his sea of consciousness, when the time came to form the real rune. But even without it, this full construct on parchment was a practice masterpiece. Mana pulsed in layers, from core to outer ring. Then it began pulsing faster and faster. Until, boom. The entire parchment exploded and burned to ashes. The two of them silently stared at the desk with parchment debris scattered around. Orion's lips twitched as the crystal bottle of ink had blasted apart during the explosion, and all the ink had splashed onto his clothes and face. "Well, that's a stylish way of tanning, master. You look good, really." Lumi's voice sounded in his mind, barely able to contain her laughter. What went wrong? Orion silently questioned himself. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had done nearly everything properly, and without the origin glyph, it was supposed to only power itself for a few seconds before the mana that he injected exhausted itself. But instead, the entire structure crumbled. "I think the issue is with the mana circuits, master," Lumi thoughtfully said. You think so? "I'm pretty sure I connected them properly," he said with confidence. "Might be how you connected the mana circuits, maybe you messed up the connections of one of them?" "Well, whatever. I'll try again. I think the issue was with the runic inscription, I didn't input the details correctly." They continued to discuss the failure and tried to brainstorm why he had failed, and after a few minutes of back and forth, Orion decided to just try again. Picking up another parchment, he placed it in front of him and took out another crystal bottle filled with mana-conductive ink, then picked up a brush. "Here goes nothing." Saying that, he once again began forming the rune, following all his steps until the runic inscription turned as he began to change a few details. Lumi continued to insist that it might be due to the mana circuits. Search * the novel, ir.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. As time passed and the second one came to a close, he took a deep breath and finished the final stroke. Boom. Another explosion. However, this time, he had already placed all the parchments and other things away from the table, so the explosion only destroyed the parchment itself. Again. He exhaled and said, "Now it's time you try my method, master." Orion's lips twitched. All right. Don't chew my ears out, I'll try changing up a few things." Saying that, he cleaned away his table and began anew on another parchment, following what Lumi advised. He created it more carefully this time, double-checking all the details. It will definitely work this time. Boom. Chapter 129, Reason for Explosion. The entire parchment went up in flames again, leaving both Lumi and Orion staring at it in stunned silence. "Why did you have to set up a red flag?" Orion muttered, letting out a long sigh as he slumped back in the chair. "There's something wrong. We did everything right. This shouldn't be happening." Knock knock. "Master, are you alright?" came Fiora's soft voice from outside the door. "Come in," Orion called out. Honestly, he could use a break after another string of failures. Fiora opened the door and stepped inside, but the moment her eyes landed on him, she froze. "Master. What happened to Yu?" she stammered, quickly rushing over to check on him. "Huh? What do you mean what hap?" he trailed off as he followed her gaze downward. His entire body was smeared with black ink and ash, making him look like a coal miner fresh from the depths. "Ha ha 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 ha, master. Ha ha ha, why you look so funny. Ha ha ha, I can't." Orion clenched his fists, resisting the overwhelming urge to bonk her into silence, then turned to Fiora and gestured for her to calm down. A few parchments just exploded. Nothing serious happened, he said with a sigh. Fiora paused, gently brushing away some of the ash from his shoulder as she checked him over. Still, you're completely covered. Are you sure you're not hurt anywhere? Yes, I'm fine, Orion replied calmly. She finally relaxed and took a step back, her gaze drifting toward the scorched desk. Why did they explode? Orion shrugged. Beats me. Then, as if a thought struck him, he turned toward the charred remains. Let me try the Eye of Revelation. He closed his eyes for a moment, then reopened them, his pupils faintly glowing, as he focused on the burnt parchment. Ashes, remains of an overloaded common-grade parchment. Master? Fiora tilted her head, gently nudging him. Aren't you the smartest system in the world? How did you not think of this? Aren't you the perfect true dragon emperor and human emperor? How did you forget this minor detail? The two fell silent, staring blankly at the pile of ash, finally understanding where they had gone wrong. But neither of them wanted to admit fault. Fiora, still clueless, looked between Orion and the wrecked desk with visible concern. He let out a long breath. I should go and talk to Grandma. Just as he turned to leave, Fiora quickly stepped in front of him. But, look at why yourself, she said, pointing at the ink-covered mess he had become. Well, a bath is in order then, he said with a small smile. Fiora blushed faintly and gave a quick nod. I'll call Rune. No need, Orion waved her off. I won't take long. With that, he turned and casually walked toward the bathroom. Fiora lingered for a moment, fidgeting with her fingers, clearly debating something, before quickly hurrying after him. That was a good bath, Orion said with a sigh while coming outside. Fiora followed after him with a lowered head. Orion turned around and looked at her with a smile. I will be heading to visit Grandma now. Saying that, he turned around and picked up a few parchments, an ink bottle, and his brush. Fiora nodded her head and waited for him to exit the room. Orion packed his stuff and exited the bedroom. The hallway outside his room was quiet, the warm evening light streaming in from the windows casting shadows across the polished marble floor. He headed for the part of the mansion where Celine's personal study was located. It was a place rarely disturbed by anyone except Eldrick or Helena, and only when truly necessary. Orion had only been there a few times, usually to see the beautifully arrayed forged designs or mana-forged prototypes she'd sketched with glowing runes. As he approached the intricately carved double doors, a faint sound of rustling paper reached his ears. Orion paused outside, listening. Inside, Celine's voice muttered something under her breath. He heard the unmistakable sound of something being hastily folded and tucked away, blueprints, most likely. He knocked twice, his knuckles lightly tapping the dark wood surface. After a slight delay, her familiar, calm voice called out, "Come in." Orion pushed the door open and stepped inside. The scent of ink, parchment, and aged metal greeted him, along with the low hum of embedded runes softly pulsing along the walls. The study itself was grand but warm. Rich wooden shelves lined with enchanted blueprints, polished mana crystals embedded in wall sockets casting a steady azure glow, and a huge desk that held a dozen tools and half-completed inscriptions. Celine looked up from behind her desk, where she had clearly just hidden a large scroll under a silk cover. Her deep gray eyes locked onto his, instantly assessing his mood. Orion gave her a small, sheepish smile. "Hey, Grandma." Celine leaned back slightly in her chair, raising an eyebrow. "It's rare for you to visit me here. Tell me, what happened? You exploded something?" Orion let out a sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. "More like 3 somethings exploded. I was trying to practice constructing my affinity rune. But every time I complete the formation layer, the entire parchment combusts." Celine's expression turned thoughtful. "Exploding parchment, She gestured to the chair in front of her desk. "Show me." Orion quickly nodded and sat down, pulling out a fresh piece of parchment and unsealing one of the mana ink bottles with ease. He dipped his brush with steady fingers and began to draw. He started with the structural layer, drawing a precise circular boundary, then scribing the 9 primary runes around it: fire, flow, stabilize, amplify, ignite, focus, contain, reinforce, channel, each inked in with glowing efficiency. His mana flowed steadily through his brush and into the page with unwavering focus. Celine leaned forward, elbows on the desk, resting her chin atop laced fingers. She watched intently, eyes scanning the precision of his work with the eyes of a master craftswoman. Then came the mana circuits. He traced the intricate threads linking each rune to its companions, the web of mana paths blooming like a magical nervous system. Again, nothing flickered, his mana flowed cleanly. Celine's eyes flashed with recognition and approval. Finally, he inscribed the runic language, writing the operational logic in tight, clean script around the internal edge of the rune circle. Each rune hummed lightly, indicating correct mana infusion. Orion took a deep breath and began the final step, the formation layer. Xianxia, the novelfire.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. He slowly painted a translucent globe around the rune, letting the ink rise in a dome. This time, he very carefully adjusted the mana flow, less pressure than before, based on both Lumi's suggestions and his own instincts. As the final stroke was completed, the rune began to glow softly. The parchment trembled, boom, before exploding into ashes again. Celine waved her hand, and a barrier of mana formed in front of her and Orion, shielding them from the aftermath of dust and ashes. As the dust settled, Orion and Celine looked at each other. His face held a wry smile as he looked at her. Celine softly shook her head. Edgar probably didn't expect you to use 9 runes on this low-level parchment. So it was due to the quality of this parchment? He asked. Chapter 130, Calm Before the Storm. Yes, you can only practice making a few runes on this parchment at max. But you on the other hand, were making 9. Of course, it will explode. She softly chuckled. Orion spread out his hand. Then what am I supposed to do? I feel like I'm doing it the right way, but I can't be sure. She gave a wry smile. You weren't wrong in your formation, it's just that the medium wasn't made to handle your scale of output. This is why real affinity runes are formed directly inside the sea of consciousness. There, your mana capacity sets the limits, not the material. Then what should I do? He blinked. She reached into her desk and handed him a stack of high-grade training parchment, laced with mana-stabilizing veins. Try again with these. They won't explode, unless you do something really wrong. Orion grinned, feeling like a weight had lifted off his chest. Thanks, Grandma. Of course, she said gently, her smile softening. Now go. I expect you to burn that beard of your grandpa when you form your affinity rune. Orion speechlessly looked at her and shook his head. Then I will head back and practice with these. Saying that, he quickly exited the room before she asked him to burn off Eldric's hair as well. As he reached his door, Orion exhaled and stepped inside. Feeling at ease, he gently placed the fresh stack of high-grade parchment on his desk, the surface now cleaned and fresh by Fiora after the last few attempts. Master got an upgrade. Look at those thick, beautiful pages. They won't betray you like those weaklings from earlier. Or maybe I won't overload them this time, Orion replied with a chuckle. He rolled his shoulders, cracking his knuckles before settling into his chair once again. The parchment had a faint shimmer under the mana lamp's glow, its texture much denser and smoother than the brittle common-grade pages. Orion ran a thumb along the edge, sturdy, resilient, and pulsing faintly with stabilizing veins of blue ink. All right, he murmured to himself. No explosions this time. He began the process anew, every movement steady and confident. The structural layer formed with ease, the 9 primary runes settling around the circular frame like celestial bodies in a perfect orbit. Mana circuits flowed like blood vessels, linking each rune with seamless symmetry. Then came the runic language, scribed gently with precision, followed by the formation layer, the shimmering dome painted softly over the entire structure. He poured mana into the formation with delicate control, enough to activate the formation. The parchment glowed. And then, it stabilized. The Affinity rune pulsed gently on the page, resonating softly but without releasing power. No combustion. No mana backlash. Just soft, warm glow, perfectly stable. Orion leaned back, eyes flashing brightly. Woo! It's alive. It didn't explode. You did it, Master. He laughed quietly, a real, heartfelt sound. Not bad at all. He practiced again. Then again. With every repetition, the movements became cleaner, smoother, more instinctual, his mana refining with each attempt, until the act of creation became second nature. By the fourth complete rune, he was breathing rhythmically, his heartbeat steady with a calm mind. Knock knock. A gentle voice floated in from the other side of the door. Master, it's time for dinner, Rune called out. Orion blinked and looked out the window. The sun had nearly set. All right, he said, standing and brushing his hands off. It's time for dinner already, huh? Taking one last glance at the softly glowing runes on his desk, he smiled and turned around to leave. Orion pushed open the doors and smiled, seeing Celine sitting at her usual spot. Noticing him, she gestured for him to come forward and sit down. How did your practice go? Eldrick asked with a smile. Orion nodded his head. It went well. I think I'm ready to forge my first Affinity rune. Should I try it after dinner? Celine shook her head. No, you should stop practicing for the day and have a good rest. We will do this in the morning. Orion nodded his head. That's what he had planned as well, since he didn't want to rush his Affinity rune forging process. After eating silently for a while, Celine broke the silence. cthnovelier.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. So, Celine asked, her voice light but curious, how many times did you blow up your desk before you decided to ask for help? Orion gave her a look. Only 3. Eldrick raised an eyebrow and coughed with a grin. Only? I didn't have the good parchment then. Orion defended, reaching for the basket of sliced bread. The problem wasn't me, it was the material. Celine gave him a knowing smirk. That's what they all say before their spell backfires and they lose eyebrows. Orion chuckled, shaking his head as he spooned stew into his bowl. Well, at least my eyebrow survived. Eldrick gave him a mock-serious nod. Then we shall count today as a victory. They continued eating, the sound of silverware gently clinking against plates and bowls accompanying the low noises of conversation. Celine occasionally commented on the rune structure he described. She didn't just ask about progress, she understood it, visualized it. She offered small tips between bites, casually correcting the angle of mana flow in his channel rune or the layering order in his formation layer. How long were you awaiting this day, brat? You seem quite excited. Eldrick said with a laugh. Since the day I was awakened, Orion replied with a chuckle. Now, this feels like the start of something real. Celine gave him a soft smile and nodded. It is. After dinner, Orion quietly excused himself and returned to his room. The hallways were still and peaceful now, the soft thrum of mana lights overhead like a gentle lullaby. Once inside, he stripped off his outer layers and collapsed onto the bed, arms behind his head, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The stars outside twinkled through his window. His body was tired, but his mind refused to slow just yet. Master, you really did amazing today. You've grown so much. I know, Orion replied softly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. It's only been a couple of days, but it already feels like everything's changed. Tomorrow's a big step. My first Affinity rune. Are you nervous? Orion was silent for a moment. Then, no, I can't wait for tomorrow to arrive. It feels like when GTA 6 was released, and I bought a new PS5 just to play it. It's that kind of excitement. Hee, then you should sleep early, Master. So, morning can arrive faster. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to. You think I can sleep with my heart beating in excitement? The two of them continued to bicker back and forth for a while before Orion felt his eyelids turning heavy, and he fell asleep early. The gentle moonlight filled the room with a soft glow as, for the first time in the last few days, he managed to sleep on a bed. Sunlight came filtering through the windows as Orion slowly woke up. Remembering what he needed to do today, his sleepiness vanished at once. "Good morning, Master. You are quite energetic today. Greater than over equal to 4 all less than over equal to. Of course, today will be a big day." Chapter 131, Beginning of the Affinity Rune Formation plus, Turn off Reset. Chapter 131, Beginning of the Affinity Rune Formation. A soft knock sounded on the door, followed by Rune's usual energetic voice. "It's morning, Master." "I'm already up," he called back, voice unusually energetic. The door opened with a gentle creak, revealing Fiora and Rune standing there, their faces bathed in the soft glow of morning sunlight. "Good morning, Master," Rune chirped, stepping inside cheerfully. She tilted her head curiously at his unusually bright demeanor. "My, someone looks especially lively today. Did something good happen?" Fiora shyly followed her, a gentle blush coloring her cheeks as she glanced towards Orion with curiosity. Master, is there something special today?" Orion stood, stretching his back with a satisfying crack, and gave them both an easy smile. "Indeed. Today, I'm finally going to form my first affinity rune. After all the training and preparations, it's finally happening." Fiora's eyes widened in admiration, clasping her hands together in excitement. "Oh really? That's amazing, Master." Rune, on the other hand, looked at him suspiciously. "Master, you already mastered the primary runes, the mana circuits, and the runic inscriptions necessary for the affinity rune in these few days?" Orion gently flicked her forehead. "Stop underestimating your master." Rune giggled while placing a hand on her forehead and giving a playful nod. "No wonder you're shining brighter than the sun this morning. That's truly a special occasion then." Orion chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Enough teasing. Let's get this bath over quickly, I want to be ready soon." The bath went swiftly, but the brief moments were filled with cheerful conversation and gentle laughter. Rune, ever playful, jokingly warned Orion about causing another explosion, while Fiora attentively ensured every detail was perfect for Orion's big moment. After bathing and dressing in a fresh set of clothes, Orion felt refreshed, his excitement sharpened even further. With a gentle wave to his maids, he stepped out of the room and briskly walked toward the dining hall, his footsteps echoing softly in the empty hallway. When he entered, Eldrick and Celine were already seated, quietly conversing, their plates full with food and the atmosphere comfortably casual. The comforting scent of freshly baked bread and cooked eggs greeted Orion warmly as he approached. Eldrick looked up first, his eyes twinkling with amusement upon seeing Orion's unusually enthusiastic expression. "Haha, morning lad. Judging by your face, you're ready for war." Orion grinned broadly, pulling out his chair and sitting down. "Something like that. I'm eager to get started." Celine chuckled softly, placing her teacup gently down on the saucer. Her gaze was warm, but there was a careful seriousness hidden within. "It's good to be excited, but remember to stay calm. An affinity rune isn't something you rush." Orion nodded earnestly, reaching for some bread. "I understand. I'll take it slow and steady." Celine's eyes softened further, and she shared a glance with Eldrick before turning back to Orion. "I think we'll accompany you today, just in case. The process is normally straightforward, but since you're pushing the boundaries with 9 runes, it's best we oversee it." Orion hesitated for a moment but soon nodded in acceptance. "Alright, having you both there would ease my nerves anyway." Eldrick laughed, clapping Orion lightly on the shoulder. "Relax, boy. With us 2 old-timers around, there's nothing to worry about. Just think of us as insurance." Orion couldn't help but smile, his anxiety fading slightly with Eldrick's reassuring laughter. They continued breakfast peacefully, the conversation drifting between lighter topics as Orion gradually found his calm. Once they finished breakfast, Eldrick and Celine exchanged meaningful glances and nodded. Celine gracefully rose from her seat, her expression composed yet encouraging. "Let's go, Orion," she said softly. "There is a good chamber here for this stuff, we will head there. After all, that's a good place for secluded training." Orion silently nodded, his heartbeat quickening as he stood, following closely behind his grandparents. They moved through the mansion's corridors, the silence around them solemn, not treating the future-altering event of Orion's life lightly. Eventually, they reached a heavy wooden door edged with intricate runes, softly glowing in anticipation of their presence. Eldrick stepped forward and gently pressed his hand against it, and with a quiet hum, the door swung inward. Inside, the unfamiliar sight greeted Orion. The circular chamber was bathed in gentle ambient mana. At the center was a soft cushion, surrounded by intricate inscriptions glowing faintly, intended to calm the mind and ease mana flow. "Sit comfortably in the center, Orion. We already changed the room a little to make it more suitable for forming Affinity Rune," Eldrick instructed gently, his deep voice steadying. "Relax your breathing, keep your mind clear. The origin glyph will emerge naturally. Don't force it." Celine added softly, "And remember, control is more important than power right now. Keep your mana steady, balanced. Don't overwhelm your sea of consciousness." Orion nodded and went ahead to sit down cross-legged at the room's center, the comfortable cushion supporting him. He took a deep breath, slowly exhaling. "I understand. I'll stay cautious." Search *Vinifier.at website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Eldrick smiled warmly, stepping back to stand beside Celine. "Good. We'll be right here. Begin whenever you feel ready." Orion closed his eyes, centering himself. Then, he moved his will inside his sea of consciousness, and an immense expanse of azure came into his view. It was empty, utterly empty with nothing in sight as most of it was covered with dense azure mist. "Is it just me or has the mist grown denser?" "Your body is passively accumulating mana, Master. You won't need to take long to reach the second tier of Awakening Realm once you form your Affinity Rune." He nodded his head and moved through the dense mist towards the Fire Affinity Orb. And soon, he came in front of the ocean of Affinity Orbs again. "Now that I see, there are a total of 25 Affinity Orbs, huh?" He curiously counted the orbs. "Yes, more than what we learned at the Academy." He shook his head, "Those are for later, let's focus on what's for today." "It's time, Master. Are you ready?" He took a deep breath as the mana inside his sea of consciousness churned. "I've never been more ready in my nearly 3 months of life." Orion's consciousness stood at the heart of his sea of consciousness, bathed in endless waves of azure mana that pulsed rhythmically around him. Directly ahead, the orb representing his fire affinity floated, radiating fierce heat and brilliant golden-red light, dominating the vast spiritual space with an imposing aura. "Here we go," Orion whispered internally, his mental voice steady and clear. Every fiber of his being felt charged with excitement, yet tempered by caution and responsibility. Closing his mental eyes, he allowed himself to sink into a deep state of concentration, feeling his heart's rhythm match the pulsing mana around him. Gradually, instinctively, his mind reached out towards the fiery orb, gently brushing its blazing surface before he tried to penetrate it with his will. However, the moment his consciousness touched it, a searing wave of heat surged forward, raw, primal, overwhelming. Orion winced slightly, his spiritual form trembling under the immense pressure. Despite it being his affinity, it wasn't in his total control due to the lack of an affinity rune, that's why it hurt his consciousness to forcefully enter it. Chapter 132, finishing up however, instead of retreating, he steadied his mind and dove deeper, allowing the flames to wrap around him fully, embracing the fiery torrent rather than resisting it. A vivid image began forming deep within his soul. It took shape instinctively, lines of fire twisting together into an intricate pattern, glowing with primal essence. This was the origin glyph, pure, unfiltered by conscious thought, born solely from his soul's nature and his unique resonance with fire. Back in the physical realm, Eldrick and Celine watched silently, their expressions calm but intensely focused. The chamber was quiet, save for the gentle hum of mana reverberating from the inscriptions on the walls. Suddenly, Eldric's brows furrowed slightly as he noticed subtle fluctuations in Orion's aura. He exchanged a quick glance with Celine, whose usually composed expression revealed subtle hints of concern. She took a step forward, her voice low and cautious. "His mana is fluctuating sharply. Something might be wrong." Eldric raised a hand slowly, preventing her from intervening immediately. "Wait. Give him time. Let's observe first. He might stabilize." Meanwhile, Orion was experiencing a tempest of pure elemental fury. The origin glyph, blazing brilliantly in his mind's eye, twisted and contorted like molten lava, refusing to settle. Every attempt he made to calm it seemed to fuel its wild movements further, its shape continually shifting, unstable and unpredictable. "Calm down," he thought, willing his nerves to settle. "It's part of me. I can control it." But the glyph only flared brighter, searing with untamed heat. He realized he was attempting to force control over something inherently wild, primal, and instinctual. His approach needed to change. "All right," Orion thought resolutely. "Let's try something else." Instead of suppressing the blazing glyph, he opened himself fully to it, letting it free rather than asserting his dominance over it. Instantly, a wave of raw emotion surged forward, passion, anger, determination, excitement, mingling freely. He allowed the emotions to flow through him, embracing them rather than resisting, becoming one with the fire rather than its master. Almost immediately, the origin glyph responded, stabilizing rapidly into a majestic symbol, a swirling flame radiating brilliant golden-red hues, intricately etched yet boldly simple in nature. The glyph hovered calmly now, its fire blazing with supreme intent instead of chaos. Eldric's shoulders visibly relaxed as he nodded slightly to Celine, a small smile curving his lips. "See?" He found his balance. Celine released the breath she had been unconsciously holding, her posture easing. "Indeed. The boy truly has exceptional instincts." With the origin glyph stabilized, Orion shifted his focus outward, beginning the careful construction of the structural layer. Recalling each primary rune vividly, he started placing them meticulously around the fiery core: fire, flow, stabilize, amplify, ignite, focus, contain, reinforce, and channel. Each rune settled into position smoothly, resonating harmoniously with the origin glyph at the center. However, as Orion began connecting the mana circuits, he encountered another obstacle. His mana surged unexpectedly due to him being in his SOC and forgetting to take into account that all of his mana was gathered here, its sheer potency nearly overwhelming the delicate circuitry, threatening to shatter the carefully constructed array. Sweat formed on Orion's forehead in the physical realm, his body tense from the strain. Eldric's expression grew solemn again, quietly whispering, "Careful now, lad. Control your mana carefully." Celine clenched her fists softly at her sides, readying herself to intervene at a moment's notice. Inside his sea of consciousness, Orion gritted his mental teeth, focusing intently. "Steady. Just slow it down. Don't force it through." He visualized his mana as a gentle water stream flowing through his body as he gently guided it through the circuits. Bit by bit, his control tightened, the circuits stabilizing under his careful manipulation. Soon, the fluctuations calmed, the chaotic pressure subsided, and without missing a beat, he began carving runic inscriptions all over the structural layer. Soon, the structural layer settled down, humming gently in harmony with the surrounding mana. Eldric chuckled softly, visibly relieved. "That was close." Celine nodded quietly. "He's truly doing something extraordinary here. Most wouldn't recover from that due to the sheer number of runes." Finally came the formation layer. Orion cautiously guided pure, refined mana into forming the outer spherical shell, delicately interweaving it with the origin glyph and structural layer. Here, the greatest danger awaited, uniting the affinity orb with logical structure and stabilizing everything within a perfect spherical shell. The moment Orion connected the layers, another ripple coursed violently through his sea of consciousness, sending powerful reverberations outward. The rune trembled alarmingly, threatening to unravel entirely. In the physical world, Eldrick and Celine leaned forward simultaneously, faces tense. But Orion, prepared this time, reacted swiftly. He calmed his breathing, steadied his mind, and carefully adjusted the flow of mana with extreme precision, threading a thin, delicate line of mana from the origin glyph outward through every rune in a gentle, intricate web. Slowly but surely, the tremors subsided. The layers interlocked perfectly, sealing the entire construct with a gentle pulse of warm energy. Boom! The affinity rune sent a tremor throughout his sea of consciousness, drifting away from the other runes and occupying a space of its own inside his massive SOC. The completed fire affinity rune hovered brilliantly in that corner, stable and radiant, emitting a majestic, fiery glow throughout his sea of consciousness. Exhaling deeply, Orion opened his eyes back in the physical realm, blinking slightly. His face was covered in sweat, and his breathing was somewhat heavy, but he smiled broadly, meeting the proud gazes of Eldrick and Celine. "It's done," he whispered breathlessly. "The affinity rune. It's complete." SEA the Nelfire.nt website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Celine stepped forward immediately, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Her voice was filled with warmth and pride. "Excellent work, Orion. Truly remarkable." Eldrick nodded deeply, eyes glowing with pride. "Congratulations, lad. You've officially begun your true journey, and with 9 damn primary runes at that." Orion chuckled softly, relief and pride washing through him. "Thank you, both of you. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Eldrick waved his hand dismissively, grinning broadly. "Bah, you underestimate yourself. We were merely spectators today. The achievement belongs fully to you." Celine squeezed Orion's shoulder affectionately, adding, "Rest now. This was a monumental step. Take a moment to savor it." Orion nodded silently, exhaustion finally catching up to him as his eyes became heavy and he fell asleep. Back within his sea of consciousness, the brilliant affinity rune continued to pulse gently, radiating light throughout his sea of consciousness. Inside the chamber, Eldrick gently shook his head. "He really overworks himself sometimes." Celine softly nodded her head. "Well, we can't stop him from pursuing his dreams. All we can do is quietly support him." Eldrick exhaled a sigh. "I wonder which spell he will learn first." Celine giggled. "You can stop wondering, it won't be from your thunder element. TSK, this brat should have learned the thunder element first, and he should have revealed thunder instead of fire if he was going to do it. I could have personally trained him then." He shook his head with an exaggerated sigh. "Oh come on, you can still train him. Don't act like a disappointed old man. He must have his reasons to show fire instead of thunder. Just leave him be." The two of them continued to bicker back and forth as Eldrick picked up Orion and took him to his room to rest. Chapter 133, waking up. The warmth of the midday sun filtered gently through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor and soft bedsheets. A faint breeze came through the slightly ajar window, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the garden below. The room was silent, peaceful, save for the rhythmic ticking of an ornate mana-infused wall clock and the quiet rustle of leaves swaying outside. Orion slowly stirred beneath the covers, his consciousness pulling itself out from the wretched hands of the goddess of sleep. His body felt heavy, but not in a burdensome way. It was a satisfying exhaustion, the kind that followed a moment of accomplishing something big. He groaned lightly, eyes fluttering open to the familiar ceiling of his room. The moment the bright light hit his pupils, he blinked slowly, shielding his face with an arm. It took him a second to adjust before he finally sat up, the sheet slipping from his chest, revealing the bandage wrapped loosely across his left shoulder. Not from injury, Celine had placed it there with a rune-infused healing medicine, just in case the strain of overusing his sea of consciousness left any internal backlash. "I'm back," Orion muttered softly, glancing around the room. It was quiet. No Rena hopping around. No Fiora gently adjusting curtains. Just him. The stillness wasn't unpleasant, just peaceful. For a few seconds, he allowed himself to soak in the silence before a familiar voice chimed in, lively and bright. Master. You're awake. Greater than over equal to 4 all less than over equal to. Orion chuckled weakly. Tired of waiting already, Lil Lumi? Of course. I thought you'd sleep till tomorrow. You were out for hours. Afternoon's already halfway gone. But hey, what you did back there was seriously amazing. 9 primary runes. You really did it. He smiled faintly, leaning back against the headboard and gazing out at the sunlit sky through the window. It was harder than I thought, he murmured. The entire structure came close to breaking down multiple times. Origin glyph not connecting with the structural layer, the mana circuits not linking properly. I really thought my own body was fighting against me. But none of that happened in the end. Simply because you adapted to the situation. You didn't force the glyph, instead you let it free. You really handled your affinity well. He nodded slowly, remembering the moment of wild turbulence within his sea of consciousness, how the fire had responded to emotion more than reason, and how everything calmed once he accepted that truth. It's not just power, he muttered, voice thoughtful. It's understanding. That's the key. Exactly. You didn't just form a rune, Master. You connected with the element. That origin glyph was you, a reflection of your nature, but also your future. Orion exhaled and swung his legs off the bed, planting his feet on the cool wooden floor. His body still felt a bit sluggish, but his mind was clearer than ever. Tell me, he said, stretching his arms above his head. Now that I have the fire affinity rune, what does it mean for me? Well, first of all, it unlocks the ability to perform structured spellcasting with fire. No more raw bursts or instinctual control, you can now wield it with precision. Engrave spell patterns around the rune and bam. You've got true magic. What about spell types? Orion asked, walking slowly over to the mirror as he fixed his slightly messy hair. Can I only use attack-type spells with the primary runes that I decided on? Nope. Fire can do way more than just burn stuff. There are combustion-based acceleration techniques, heat displacement illusions, temperature-triggered formations, even refinement-type spells for crafting and forging. Some fire-based runesmiths make tools that can purify metals better than lightning. Orion blinked at that. That's nice. I didn't think about the side path while choosing the primary runes. That's because most people only use fire for attack and destruction. But with your rune structure, especially with channel, focus, and contain included, you've unlocked utility-based development paths that others at the start just ignore. Orion grinned at the thought, his mind already racing with ideas. So now I can create spells that use fire as a medium for other stuff than just attacking. Yup. Plus, your rune is now superior to others at the base level, remember? Later on, when you reforge it at higher tiers, you can retain your core design and expand it, add new runes, integrate deeper formations. I see. Orion's eyes gleamed with interest. I should choose the primary runes more carefully next time. Exactly. But your current runes are already very good. No need to think that you might have made a mistake. Asterisk? He chuckled, rubbing his forehead. Alright, stop with the sparkles. You'll overload my ego. Lumi giggled again before her tone turned playful. Now, for the long-awaited quest. Ding. Quest completed, beginning of a legend. Congratulations, Master. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to, CTH Novel Fire. Net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. You have successfully formed your first affinity rune. Reward, plus 100 SP awarded. Perfect completion bonus, plus 100 SP awarded. Total reward, plus 200 SP. You merely took a few days to do all of it, Master. Oh? Not bad, finally gave a good bonus. A full 100% bonus, huh? It's because of the 9 runes. I see. Well then, show me my status screen. Limitless System V3, Lumi. Host, Orion Hellstorm, Primus Zalzarion Draconis. Title, Perfect Being, Limit Breaker, Heir of Two Thrones, Bearer of Twisting Fates, Elemental Freak. Age, 1/9000, Soul Age, 20. Bloodline, Human Emperor, Thunder Dragon Emperor, Fire Dragon Emperor. Physique, Human Emperor's Constitution, Fire Dragon Emperor's Constitution, Thunder Dragon Emperor's Constitution. Soul, Human Emperor's Soul, Fire Dragon Emperor's Soul, Thunder Dragon Emperor's Soul. Rank, Tier 1/Hatchling. Mana Channels, 9 Primal Mana Channels, universally adaptable conduits capable of channeling all known energy forms. Affinity Runes, Fire Affinity Rune. Passive Abilities. Mark of Fate. Fire Affinity, Tier 7. Thunder Affinity, Tier 7. All other elemental affinities, Tier 6. Draconic Instinct, Suppressed. Dragon's Might. Supreme Mental Endurance. Active Abilities. Eye of Revelation, Appraisal and Bloodline Analysis. Fire Dragon's Breath. Thunder Dragon's Breath. Treasures. Soulpiercer Sword, Bound to Soul. Inventory, 28 out of 100. Gambling, 71 draws used, 407 SP remaining. Chronicle of Trials, 2 quests. The Forgotten Archive. Oh? A new tab for Affinity Runes? He quickly scanned through the list and saw that. Hehe, I will make sure to record all of your data. Are you secretly working for Echo and collecting my data for him? Moo. He can just look at you and know all about you. Why would I bother to do such a useless task? Ring in equal to underscoring in equal to. Haha, true. Anyway, looks like I have collected quite a bit of SP. You know what time it is now? Lumi's playful voice rang eagerly in his mind, brimming with excitement. He, master, ready to gamble again? Time to test your legendary luck. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Orion chuckled, shaking his head. I feel like you enjoy this even more than I do. Of course. The thrill, the excitement, the unexpected treasures. Who wouldn't love it? Alright, Lil Lumi, let's do this. Use all 400 SP, 40 draws at once. Understood, master. But wait. First, let me set the mood. Before Orion could question her, a lively, upbeat tune suddenly filled his ears, a fast-paced, catchy melody filled with electronic beats and whimsical jingles that perfectly captured the spirit of gambling. Chapter 134, Infinite Meat. He raised an eyebrow, amused. A gotcha BGM? Again? Absolutely essential for maximum luck, master. Now, here we go. The familiar interface of the limitless gambling appeared vividly in Orion's mind, displaying brightly colored, spinning wheels and flashing lights, each filled with mystery and fortune. With a wave, Lumi activated the draws. The wheels spun rapidly, flashing color swirling hypnotically, as Orion watched with tense expectation. Ding! The draws began landing one after another, revealing their results rapidly. Summary of draw results. Empty draws, 12 draws. Tier 4 treasures, 6 draws. Tier 5 treasures, 5 draws. Tier 6 treasures, 4 draws. Tier 7 treasures, 4 draws. Tier 8 treasures, 4 draws. Tier 9 treasure, 3 draws. Uncommon grade treasure, 2 draws. Orion felt his heart leap with excitement at the sight of the 2 uncommon grade treasures. Lumi's squeal echoed jubilantly in his mind. Master, master. 2 uncommon grade treasures appeared. Jackpot, jackpot. Asterisk? Calm down, Lumi, Orion chuckled, though even he was looking forward to this, as no uncommon grade treasure had disappointed him. Let's see what we've got. The treasure icons appeared one by one, detailed descriptions floating beside them. He quickly skimmed through the lower-tier treasures first, mostly consumables, armaments, and some ordinary stuff. Good enough to turn into mana crystals only. Finally, he reached the more interesting treasures. Tier 8 treasure highlight. Spirit Weave Cloak, Enchanted Garment. Enhances concealment by manipulating surrounding mana, capable of camouflaging the wearer from senses of those below Tier 7. Does the system really want me to learn stealth abilities so badly? Tier 9 treasure highlights. Phoenix Ash Elixir, Consumable. Rapidly regenerates critical injuries, granting temporary flame resistance and heightened regeneration. Runeforged Mana Ink Set, Crafting Material. High-quality ink that significantly improves rune stability, mana flow efficiency, and enhances rune potency. Good for crafting runes on weapons. Stormcaller's Boots, Equipment. Grants extreme bursts of speed and agility by harnessing wind element. Improves maneuverability and acceleration drastically. Damn, those are some good items, especially Phoenix Ash Elixir. That can be really helpful in dire situations. Hehe, you had good luck this time if we ignore those empty draws, Master. He shook his head and continued to read further, reaching the uncommon grade treasures. Uncommon grade treasure 1. Infinite Meatball Forge, Artifact, Storage and Culinary Device. Description. A legendary artifact forged by a whimsical runesmith who loved to eat a lot of food, this metallic sphere can absorb vast quantities of meat, ranging from 1 ton to an astonishing 1,000 tons, and compress it instantly into perfectly seasoned, nutrient-rich meatballs. Each meatball preserves 100% freshness, flavor, nutrition, and mana essence indefinitely. Functions. Infinite storage, can store virtually limitless amounts of meat without decay. Instant culinary creation, converts raw meat into exquisite, ready-to-eat meatballs instantly. Compression, 1 to 1,000 tons of meat compressed effortlessly into single, manageable meatballs. Enhancement, enhances meatballs with minor mana recovery and stamina rejuvenation properties upon consumption. Special effect. Meatballs created from herbs and mana beasts retain and amplify the original entity's properties, providing temporary attribute boosts upon consumption. Orion blinked, utterly speechless. Meatballs, he muttered incredulously. Lumi burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. Congratulations, Master. You've become the Meatball Emperor. Greater than over equal to nabla less than over equal to, / Orion's mouth twitched. Is the system mocking me right now? But it's amazing. Infinite food storage, instant meals, delicious and nutritious. Think of the adventures. Think of the tasty meatballs. Think of never eating bland meals again. Orion sighed, massaging his temples, though a faint smile emerged on his lips. Fine, fine. It's surprisingly useful. At least now I won't ever starve during long journeys. Search * the nellfire.nt website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Exactly. Just toss in a whole dragon, and bam. True dragon meatballs. You might get powerful boosts from eating them, too. Orion's brow twitched. You want me to put myself in it? He shook his head, reviewing his second uncommon grade treasure thoughtfully. Uncommon grade treasure 2. Verdant Root Grimoire. Description. A pristine jade-bound tome made with ancient bark-like veins and leaf-shaped runes, the Verdant Root Grimoire is a legendary compendium of all known wood element knowledge and spell formations, ranging from Tier 1 to beyond Tier 9. It was once owned by a long-forgotten grand sage who walked across this continent, planting forests with every step. This is a good one, Master. Good, now I have the second element that I can learn, he said with a bright smile, looking at the Verdant Root Grimoire. Now that I think about it, even the infinite meatball forge can be used during my evolution, when I will need an absurd amount of energy. That will be useful then, he said thoughtfully. Indeed, Master. Now you only need an absurd amount of meat to make meatballs. Shaking his head, he quickly scanned through the results again, and only then did he nod his head with satisfaction. Overall, it's a great haul. A few empty draws, but the rest compensated nicely. Hee, your luck really never disappoints, Master. Orion stretched comfortably, standing up from his bed and walking to the window. Gazing out at the serene garden bathed in afternoon sunlight, he exhaled slowly, feeling strangely content. His sea of consciousness now held a perfectly formed, 9-layered fire affinity rune, his arsenal of treasures had significantly expanded, and his field of work had grown considerably. "Lumi," he said softly, "what do you think I should focus on next?" Lumi's voice grew soft, thoughtful. "Master, I think it's time you delve deeper into spell creation and practical combat training. Mastering spells, refining rune formations, and preparing yourself thoroughly for the upcoming challenges, especially the Academy's tests. Who knows what Hargan will throw at you?" Orion chuckled and nodded his head. "Ah yes, our dear Vice Dean Hargan. I wonder what will be the next test. But anyway, you're right. I can't let this momentum slow down. We're just getting started." "Exactly, Master. And I'll be right by your side every step of the way." With renewed focus, Orion clenched his fist, eyes sparkling brightly. He had come far, but the road ahead stretched further still, brimming with potential and adventure. And, of course, countless meatballs. Smiling to himself, he turned around, ready to try something new. "Alright, Lumi, let's get started. First things first, let's test that meatball artifact." "Yes, Master." "Meatballs incoming. Greater than over equal to nabla less than over equal to." Orion walked slowly toward his desk, a curious smile still lingering on his face. He mentally summoned the newly acquired artifact from his inventory, and in the next instant, a metallic sphere about the size of a human head appeared, hovering gently above his open palm. It was crafted from polished, gleaming metal that shone faintly in the soft light filtering through the window. Across its surface ran intricate inscriptions, faintly glowing with a pleasant golden hue, clearly marking it as no ordinary tool. "So, this is the infinite meatball forge?" Orion murmured aloud, unable to fully suppress a small chuckle at the whimsical name. Lumi giggled in his mind, clearly amused at the entire scenario. "Indeed, Master. Behold the best culinary treasure available to you. Ready to test it out?" Orion nodded with a grin, excitement sparkling in his eyes. "Alright, let's give this thing a spin. We'll start small first, just a ton." He reached out with his mind, selecting exactly 1 ton of mana beast meat from the massive stockpile he had in his inventory. Chapter 135, Spear. With a mental nudge, he guided the meat directly toward the artifact. Instantly, the metallic sphere emitted a gentle hum and began to spin slowly, mana gently swirling around it. In a flash of golden brilliance, the massive pile of meat vanished, replaced by a perfectly round, freshly cooked meatball hovering neatly in Orion's palm. He blinked in disbelief, staring at the meatball incredulously. Despite weighing precisely 1 ton moments ago, it was now no larger than a regular ping-pong ball, exuding a mouth-watering aroma filled with spices, herbs, and faint traces of mana essence. "What in the heavens?" Orion muttered, amazed at the artifact's incredible ability. His stomach involuntarily growled, reacting to the irresistible scent wafting upward. "See, Master? Told you it's amazing. Give it a taste." Greater than over equal to less than over equal to, /. Without hesitating, Orion threw the meatball in his mouth. A burst of rich, succulent flavor immediately flooded his senses, the meat tender, juicy, and perfectly seasoned, carrying a subtle warmth that rejuvenated his muscles and revitalized his mana flow. Feels like I've eaten well for the first time in years. "This is genuinely amazing," Orion admitted with a sigh of pleasant surprise. "I might have underestimated this artifact." "Hee, that's of course. You are a hatchling true dragon right now, of course your body would need a lot of nutrition to grow up quickly. But you couldn't eat so much before due to being in a human body and, well, Grandma and Grandpa wouldn't have the best of reactions." Orion lightly chuckled, true. But anyways, since it worked flawlessly, let's convert the rest of it. Let's start with 99 tons of it, should be manageable, right? Let's see the magic, Master." With another mental command, he directed another portion, 99 tons, to the infinite meatball forge. The artifact thrummed energetically, emitting a louder hum this time, mana patterns rapidly spinning across its metallic surface. In mere moments, the tremendous quantity of meat was condensed into 99 additional identical meatballs, each brimming with mana-infused vitality and delicious fragrance. Orion picked up one, marveling at its deceptive simplicity. Incredible. 99 tons of meat compressed into 99 meatballs. This artifact is something else. Sar the Novel Fire. Net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Now you'll never go hungry again. You're the meatball monarch. Asterisk. He laughed warmly, storing away the delicious meatballs in his inventory for future use. Standing up, Orion stretched lazily, feeling deeply satisfied and amused. I suppose I've played enough. Time to find Grandpa and Grandma, Orion said softly, stepping out into the hallway. Outside, he spotted Rune dusting an ornate vase near the staircase. She turned immediately upon hearing his footsteps, offering him a cheerful smile and polite bow. Good afternoon, Master, she said warmly. Did you rest well? He nodded, smiling gently. Yes, thank you, Rune. Do you happen to know where my grandparents are? Fiora, who was passing by carrying a tray, paused at hearing this question, shyly stepping forward. Lady Celine and Lord Eldrick are currently in the smithy behind the mansion. Lady Celine seemed quite excited. Orion raised an eyebrow, interest piqued. Is that so? I'll head there then. Thank you both. You're welcome, Master, the two maids replied in unison, watching him warmly as he turned and made his way towards the mansion's rear exit. Walking down the polished corridors, Orion stepped into the gardens at the back. The afternoon sun bathed the grounds in warm, golden light, creating dark shadows beneath the trees lining the paved path. The fresh fragrance of mana-filled flowers drifted lazily on the breeze, carrying faint undertones of smelting iron and burning coals. At the far end, tucked away and partially obscured by giant, leafy trees, stood the smithy. A building forged from dark stone and reinforced with iron supports, its high chimney steadily released gentle trails of pale smoke into the clear sky. Drawing closer, Orion began to hear the rhythmic clang of hammer upon metal, steady, strong, and deliberate. His curiosity grew as the sounds became clearer, and he quickened his pace. Finally reaching the sturdy wooden doors, Orion pushed them open gently, greeted by a wave of intense warmth emanating from within. However, the intense heat only felt like a gentle breeze due to his fire dragon lineage. Ignoring the heat, he looked inside as the sight before him immediately brought a smile to his face. Celine stood confidently at the forge, her hair tied back, eyes intensely focused as she skillfully shaped glowing metal. Eldrick, arms crossed, leaned casually against the nearby anvil, nodding and occasionally offering suggestions. Careful, dear, Eldrick cautioned teasingly. You don't want to ruin the spear's balance. Celine scoffed playfully without looking up, hammer striking the metal precisely. I've been forging weapons before you could even swing one, you stubborn old man. Eldrick chuckled heartily, but turned as he sensed Orion's presence, eyes brightening immediately. Ah, Orion. Good to see you awake. Celine paused, glancing up and offering Orion a gentle smile. Feeling better now, dear? Orion nodded eagerly, stepping fully into the smithy's comforting warmth. Yes, Grandma. Much better. I heard you two were busy here, what's got you both so occupied? Celine's eyes sparkled with excitement as she raised the half-formed spear tip, glowing fiercely from the forge's heat. This, my dear grandson, is your future weapon. It's time we forge something truly worthy of you. Orion tilted his head slightly, confusion flickering across his expression as his gaze settled on the half-forged spearhead glowing brilliantly in Celine's grasp. The flames of the forge behind her crackled and danced, casting shadows that flickered warmly across the stone walls. Wait. Orion began hesitantly, scratching the back of his head with uncertainty. I thought you said you were forging me a sword, Grandma? Why does this look more like a spear? Celine smiled knowingly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Oh? Were you expecting something else? Orion's brows furrowed further. Well, yeah, a sword? I've been practicing with it for quite a while now. She laughed softly, a gentle, warm sound that filled the smithy with warmth far beyond the forge's flames. Without replying immediately, she turned and gracefully walked toward one of the sturdy, rune-etched wooden shelves that lined the far wall of the forge. Carefully placing down the still glowing spearhead, she reached out and withdrew a long, cloth-covered item from the shelf. Turning back, she stepped closer to Orion, who stared curiously, anticipation growing visibly on his face. With a soft chuckle, Celine slowly peeled back the protective cloth, revealing a breathtaking sword that instantly captured Orion's full attention. The sword was strikingly beautiful, yet it radiated an aura of subtle danger. Its blade was long, slender, and perfectly balanced, a masterwork of both deathly brilliance. But the most striking feature was its sheer blackness. The blade appeared forged from pure obsidian, absorbing every speck of surrounding light until it seemed as if a piece of night itself had been shaped into weapon form. The metallic handle was wrapped securely in smooth black leather, adorned subtly with delicate yet intricate metallic threads that gleamed with a faint silvery glow. Orion stared at it, eyes wide with astonishment and awe. He reached out instinctively, his fingers hovering mere inches from the blade, sensing the dense mana rippling faintly just beneath its dark surface. Chapter 136, The Sword. It's incredible. He whispered with excitement, almost afraid to touch it. Grandma, when did you even finish this? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Celine smiled affectionately, gently placing the sword into Orion's waiting hands. I finished forging this in the afternoon, just before you woke up. I wanted it to be a surprise. You had just finished forming your affinity rune. After all, I thought this would be a perfect reward for such an achievement. Orion carefully examined the blade closely, eyes narrowing as he noticed the intricate details upon closer inspection. His breath hitched sharply as he saw the staggering complexity of the sword's internal inscriptions. There were exactly 23 distinct runes carved meticulously along the length of the sword's blade, each radiating subtle waves of mana. More astounding, however, was the dense network of microscopic mana circuits and runic language that intricately filled every inch of space between and around each primary rune. The inscriptions were so minute yet perfectly detailed that Orion realized he'd never observed anything of this complexity before, even within the Thunder Peak Royal Academy's advanced runic studies. His voice trembled slightly with barely restrained excitement. 23 runes, and so many mana circuits. Grandma, just what level is this sword exactly? Celine smiled proudly, folding her arms as she admired the blade herself. It's nothing special, only a tier 7 sword, my dear. But I did use extremely high-quality obsidian void steel alloy mixed with refined high-grade mana crystals, and then infused it thoroughly with stardust during the forging process. Once you reach a high enough level in runesmithing, you can upgrade it yourself. Orion swallowed, awestruck. Void steel, no wonder it feels so different. But, isn't void steel incredibly dense and heavy? How am I even supposed to wield it effectively at my current strength? Celine gestured encouragingly, a playful gleam in her eyes. Why don't you hold it and see for yourself? Orion nodded eagerly, adjusting his stance slightly as he carefully gripped the hilt with both hands, anticipation building. Yet the moment Celine released the blade into his full grasp. Gah! He gasped, nearly collapsing to the ground as the sword's immense weight pressed down instantly upon his arms, shoulders, and back. It felt like he'd suddenly grabbed an entire mountain. Eldrick, standing nearby, burst into uproarious laughter, clutching his sides as he shook his head. Huh! You should have seen your face, lad. Priceless. Eldrick's booming laughter echoed throughout the smithy. Orion scowled slightly, lips twitching as he held onto the sword for dear life. Hey! It's way heavier than I expected. Celine chuckled softly, quickly steadying Orion by gently placing her hand on his shoulder. Relax, dear. Old man's teasing aside, the blade indeed weighs a tremendous amount naturally. It's purposely designed that way to channel immense power and momentum into each strike. Orion frowned in confusion. Then, how exactly am I supposed to use it properly? I can barely even lift it. Eldrick regained control over his laughter, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. Easy solution, brat, just drip a bit of your blood onto the sword and infuse it with your mana. The runes will activate, allowing you to control its weight with your mind. Orion gave a relieved sigh, shooting a playful glare at Eldrick. You couldn't have mentioned that earlier? Still grinning, Orion carefully pricked his finger against the blade's edge, watching intently as his blood was rapidly absorbed into the dark metal. Immediately afterward, he channeled a stream of his mana directly into the sword. In response, the blade hummed gently, runes flaring to life one by one, releasing a mesmerizing silver-blue glow across its entire length. Orion felt an instantaneous connection form between himself and the sword, almost as if it had become an extension of his own body. Now filled with confidence, Orion carefully lifted the blade again. Amazingly, this time it felt weightless, balanced perfectly under his complete control. This is incredible! Orion exclaimed joyously, easily maneuvering the sword now as if it weighed nothing at all. Celine smiled approvingly, though her voice grew serious once more. Yes, but do remember, the sword's true weight and power cannot be fully unleashed at your current level of power. Right now, you're merely controlling a small portion of its strength through runic manipulation. As your cultivation advances, you'll be able to handle more of its real power. Orion nodded seriously, knowing what she meant, as this was the perfect sword that he wanted. I will make sure to practice properly to wield this sword. Eldrick stepped forward, patting Orion's shoulder firmly, pride unmistakable in his gaze. Precisely, lad. Consider this sword a companion that'll accompany you through the early stage of your journey until you improve it. Orion took a deep breath, his fingers carefully tracing the sword's hilt as his heart finally calmed down from the initial excitement. The obsidian blade hummed gently in his grasp, sending soft vibrations through his palms, resonating harmoniously with his own mana flow. A sudden curiosity bloomed in his mind, and he glanced up towards Celine, eyes gleaming eagerly. Grandma, he began hesitantly, gently tilting the sword to better catch the faintly flickering glow of the forge. Does this sword have a name? Celine's lips curled into a soft, knowing smile, her gray eyes filled with tenderness. Why don't you turn the sword around and see for yourself, dear? Surprised yet curious, Orion quickly shifted the blade, carefully turning it over in his hand to inspect its other side. There, engraved in elegant, flowing script along the length of the blade, were two distinct words shimmering faintly in a silvery hue, Realm Guardian. His eyes widened in admiration and awe as he whispered softly, Realm Guardian. Yes, Celine confirmed softly, her voice gentle yet solemn as she stepped closer, placing a comforting hand upon his shoulder. Her touch was reassuring, warm, conveying her heartfelt emotions clearly through the subtle gesture. I named it Realm Guardian because I wish for this sword to become a steadfast companion for you, guarding you through every realm you explore and every danger you face. Let it serve as your protector, guiding you safely through your journey and ensuring your return home. Orion felt a lump form in his throat, deeply moved by her words and the profound sentiment behind the naming of the blade. He gripped the hilt tightly, absorbing the weight of responsibility along with the genuine affection emanating from the sword. Thank you, Grandma, Orion said quietly, sincerity and determination clear in his voice. I promise, I'll grow stronger, and I'll live up to the meaning behind this sword's name. Celine nodded approvingly, pride evident in the warmth of her gaze. Eldrick chuckled softly, stepping closer and ruffling Orion's hair playfully. Huh. With that sword, lad, you've got no excuse to slack off now. You better train seriously, or even Realm Guardian won't save your hide. Orion laughed lightly, gently swatting Eldrick's hand away with a playful scowl. I know, Grandpa. Believe me, I've no intention of slacking off. I'll push myself beyond limits. Eldrick grinned broadly, clearly pleased by his grandson's response. Good lad. Now go on, give the sword a proper test run. You've already rested plenty today. All right then, Orion agreed eagerly, carefully sheathing the magnificent blade within a high-quality scabbard Celine had crafted. The sword slid smoothly and silently into place, sealing perfectly. Search *the novel, ir.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Chapter 137, Adapting. I will forge your spear by tomorrow. It should become a worthy weapon on the same level as Realm Guardian soon, she smiled gently and said. Orion nodded his head with an eager expression. I can't wait to see it. After a small chat, he bid farewell to his grandparents and stepped out confidently from the smithy. Seeing him leave, Eldric's expression turned solemn as he turned around. That sword isn't a tier 7 sword. How many runes did you even put in that thing? Celine gave him a side glance. Humph. I need to ensure the safety of my grandson, even if I have to deceive him, and I didn't lie. He can upgrade those runes if his runesmithing level improves, since the material of that sword can be crafted up to Supreme Paragon level easily. Eldric didn't budge, but the power of runes I felt from it. You didn't just put primary runes, you placed advanced runes in it as well? Celine didn't bother to answer and focused on crafting the spear. Eldric heaved a sigh and shook his head, turning to look towards the gate of the smithy. Well, whatever. She is doing it for the good of that brat. As he moved through the garden, Orion called out in a clear, strong voice, Uncle Edgar. Moments later, Edgar appeared swiftly from a nearby doorway, stepping quickly onto the garden path. His posture was attentive yet relaxed, a small smile forming on his lips upon seeing Orion's enthusiastic demeanor. Search the novel, ir.nt website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. You called, young master? Edgar asked calmly, curiosity flickering in his gaze. Orion nodded eagerly, gesturing towards the sword at his waist. Yes. Let's head to the training grounds immediately. Grandma finished forging my sword, I want to test it thoroughly. Edgar's eyes briefly glanced down at the sword securely sheathed by Orion's side, admiration evident in his usually calm demeanor. Certainly, young master. I look forward to seeing your improvements. Improvements? Orion dryly chuckled. I first need to get used to its weight, Uncle Edgar. It's my first time using it. Edgar chuckled. Don't worry, young master, I'm sure you will do fine. Orion shook his head and walked inside the mansion and headed towards the training room with Edgar. This time, he didn't head towards the weapon rack to pick up a sword, instead he unsheathed his dark beauty as it sliced through the air without any effort and he stood at the center of the training ground. In his hands, Realm Guardian shimmered darkly, the obsidian blade absorbing the surrounding light with an intensity that almost made it seem alive. Its intricate runes glowed softly with every beat of Orion's heart, echoing his mana flow in a rhythmic pulse. The sword felt incredibly natural in his grasp, almost as if it had always belonged there. Edgar took his place opposite Orion, calmly picking up a sturdy practice sword from the nearby weapon rack. His movements were precise and smooth, the very image of a seasoned veteran who had faced countless battles. His expression was calm yet expectant, eyes filled with curiosity and anticipation for Orion's progress. Let us begin whenever you're ready, young master, Edgar prompted, maintaining a neutral guard stance. Orion nodded once, a focused expression forming onto his face. He gently flexed his fingers around Realm Guardian's hilt, briefly hesitating before infusing a delicate stream of mana into its core, carefully adjusting its weight. Immediately, the sword shifted perceptibly, becoming feather-light within his grip. Taking a controlled breath, Orion stepped forward decisively, initiating the first strike. The blade effortlessly sliced through the air, quicker than he anticipated. Edgar calmly parried the attack, his gaze calmly analyzing and carefully observing Orion's handling of his new weapon. Too light, young master, Edgar remarked with an encouraging smile. You'll sacrifice power for speed at that level. Try something heavier. Orion smiled. I had asked for a heavier sword for a reason. Just wanted to see how fast it can go. And immediately shifting his intent as he adjusted the mana coursing through the blade. Instantly, Realm Guardian increased significantly in weight mid-swing, surprising him. The momentum threw Orion slightly off balance, but he managed to recover swiftly. Edgar chuckled warmly, easily blocking the heavier strike. Better, but adjust gradually, young master. Let your body understand the changes. Precision, not extremes. Orion's brow twitched. It hasn't even been a minute since I started using this sword. Shaking his head, he exhaled slowly, nodding in acknowledgement. He quickly reset his posture, focusing once again. This time, he experimented cautiously, shifting the blade's weight slowly, adjusting it from a comfortable mid-range level to slightly heavier, then slightly lighter again, observing how his body responded with each change. Gradually, Orion began to adapt, finding the perfect balance between agility and strength. He felt a surge of exhilaration as the sword followed his intent smoothly, its changing weight becoming increasingly intuitive with every passing moment. Feeling more confident, Orion intensified his strikes. Realm Guardian's blade danced swiftly, its dark, polished surface glistening under the room's gentle light as he delivered precise blows toward Edgar. Each adjustment he made felt smoother, more natural, syncing perfectly with his fighting rhythm. Edgar steadily maintained his defenses, a smile of genuine satisfaction growing as he carefully countered each attack. Excellent, young master. You're adapting remarkably fast. Continue to refine your control, let the blade guide your movements. Encouraged by Edgar's words, Orion's confidence soared further. He gradually grew bolder, seamlessly adjusting Realm Guardian's weight during the fluid exchange of blows, sometimes increasing its heaviness to deliver powerful strikes, sometimes making it nearly weightless to swiftly evade Edgar's counters. With each exchange, Orion found himself becoming more adept, his movements growing increasingly fluid and precise. The sword felt alive in his hands, responding instantly to his thoughts and intentions, transforming his combat style completely. Every strike became more controlled, every parry more effortless. Sweat soon dripped down his temples, but Orion's focus remained unbroken. The relentless rhythm of their sparring echoed through the hall, interrupted only by the crisp sound of blade meeting blade and the measured breaths of both combatants. After several hours, the sunlight outside had gradually faded into night, making the room slightly more dark. Yet Orion barely noticed the passage of time, completely immersed in the intense, thrilling feeling of combat with Edgar. Eventually, Edgar stepped back, lowering his practice sword as he smiled approvingly, clearly impressed. That's enough for now, young master. You've progressed tremendously in such a short time. Truly exceptional. Orion paused, his exhaustion catching up to him as he began taking deep breaths. His adrenaline was making him keep up with Edgar for such a long time. However, a wide smile of accomplishment formed upon his face. Thank you, Uncle Edgar. This sword is unlike anything I've ever used. The ability to shift its weight so fluidly, it changes everything. Edgar nodded thoughtfully, clearly pleased by Orion's rapid mastery. Indeed. Learning to control Realm Guardian has made you vastly more versatile. It suits your style perfectly. Continue practicing this diligently, and you'll soon surpass expectations. Orion carefully sheathed Realm Guardian with a smile, feeling a sense of deep gratitude for forging such an amazing sword for him. Thanks again, Uncle Edgar, Orion said softly, sincerity evident in his tone. Your guidance is invaluable. Chapter 138, Ending Training. Edgar shook his head gently, humility clear on his face. You're too kind, young master. It's your own talent and hard work that made it possible for you to progress so fast. I merely provided the opportunities. Orion chuckled softly, wiping away sweat from his forehead. You underestimate your contributions, Uncle Edgar. Edgar smiled warmly, placing his practice sword carefully back upon the rack. You honor me, young master. Now, take some rest. You've trained sufficiently for today. Reflect on today's progress and refine your understanding. You need to focus on spells tomorrow. SAR the Nelfer.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Orion nodded his head before turning around and leaving the training room through the door. While walking back, he stared at the scabbard of the sword like an excited child who had gotten a new gift. He looks like master quite liked his sword. Of course, this is such a nice sword, and it looks so damn sexy. Orion excitedly replied. Why don't you look at its details? True, let's see what it has. Saying that, Orion's black irises briefly shimmered as he activated his Eye of Revelation, a translucent screen materializing before his vision. Realm Guardian, a Tier 7? Sword forged by runesmith Celine. Both of them stared speechlessly at the screen. I expected too much. Its level isn't high enough to analyze such high-grade treasures correctly. Yes, but those question marks after Tier 7. Eyes closed face. Orion gazed deeply at them. Is it due to the material? Or something else? Well, you will need to level up for us to find that out. Orion shook his head and closed off the system interface as he soon reached his room. Pushing open the doors, he stepped into his room with an exhale, the soft click of the wooden door closing behind him marking the end of an eventful day. He slowly walked toward the central table and set Realm Guardian down with an eager expression, the sword resting in its obsidian scabbard as though it were a sleeping beast. Orion's gaze lingered on it for several long moments, a small smile forming unconsciously on his lips. So damn cool, he thought, almost childishly pleased. You're smiling like an idiot, master, greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Orion chuckled and flopped down onto his bed, arms spread wide over the silk-lined mattress. Can you blame me? Look at that thing. If weapons had fashion shows, Realm Guardian would sweep every damn category. True, but master, don't forget, this is only the beginning. You've formed your first affinity rune and acquired a blade worthy of legends. But we still haven't even scratched the surface of your potential. He closed his eyes for a moment, soaking in the words. His muscles ached in that strangely satisfying way only real training could bring. A mix of exhaustion and pride welled up inside him. You're right, Lumi. One step at a time. Also, tomorrow's spell training, remember? It's finally time to return to the academy. You already skipped the classes. Got it, he mumbled, already feeling sleep start to tug at his consciousness. Sweet dreams, master. A faint smile rested on his face as he let himself drift off. The morning sun rose lazily above the Hellstorm estate, casting warm golden rays through the tall glass panes. Birds chirped softly outside the window as the manor slowly came to life. Orion stirred, groaning slightly as he sat up, hair a tousled mess. MNNGH, morning already? Good morning, master. Before he could reply, a knock sounded at the door. It's morning, master. I woke up, give me a minute, he said, and sleepily went towards the washroom before coming back soon after. Afterwards, Rune and Fiora came inside as he went for a bath after a small chat. After the refreshing bath, filled with laughter and chatting, Orion changed into his academy uniform, freshly pressed and emanating a faint lavender scent. Glancing at the sword sitting at the table, he decided to strap it to his waist, not wanting to leave it in his inventory like his other swords. Stepping into the hallway, he glanced in the direction of Seraph's quiet room. I couldn't talk to her yesterday. I should check in now, he thought, adjusting his collar. He walked towards her door beside his room, gently knocking once. And as usual, no response came from the other side. It's me, Seraph. I'm coming in. Softly saying that, he opened the door and stepped inside. The room was softly lit with diffused mana lanterns. Seraph sat quietly on the floor near the window, her green hair flowing like grass on the plains. She turned to face him, her expression neutral but her eyes focused as she glanced at the sword strapped to his waist. How's the view of the sky from down there? Orion chuckled and asked, seeing her sitting on the floor. Seraph slightly narrowed her eyes before turning her head back outside. Orion shook his head and sat down beside her on the floor before excitedly discussing his new sword. The chat continued for some time before he told her that he needed to go out to the academy. With that, he exited the room and made his way to the dining hall. A hearty breakfast awaited him, steamed buns, seasoned vegetables, and a small plate of sweet fruits. Eldrick and Celine were already seated. Morning, lad, were you able to sleep yesterday or just stared at your sword all night? Eldrick laughingly asked. Orion gently shook his head. I had a very good sleep with the sword by my side, he said while patting the sword at his side. Celine gently smiled, seeing him placing the sword at his waist. She softly asked, do you want your spear now? Orion's eyes immediately lit, he quickly nodded his head while taking his seat beside her. Yes, please. Celine reached into her storage ring and took out a long object wrapped in thick white cloth emanating intense mana waves. She held it effortlessly, the weight seemingly familiar in her grasp. The white cloth shimmered faintly with residual mana, clear signs of runes meant to hide the aura of the weapon within. Orion's eyes lit up instantly, his hand already itching to uncover the spear. Is this? Celine nodded, a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. Your spear. Forged from the same obsidian void steel and stardust as the core, and then infused with wind silver veins. It should perfectly cover your mid-range combat range. Without waiting for further permission, Orion leaned forward and carefully began unwrapping the cloth. As each layer peeled away, a sharp pulse of mana was released, tickling his skin. Finally, the weapon was revealed. His breath caught in his throat. The spear was breathtakingly beautiful, a work of art mixed with the duality of war and elegance. The shaft was deep obsidian black with a faint shimmer beneath the surface like the starry sky. Etched into its length were faint silver runes, running in smooth spirals like flowing currents of wind. The spearhead itself was long and slender, its edges serrated like dragon scales, forged from the same obsidian void steel. More than a weapon, it felt like a piece of art of the highest order. Orion didn't make the same mistake as last time but instead went to reach the spearhead with his finger, and made a slight cut on his finger before infusing the spear with his blood. Without missing a beat, he then infused it with his mana and reached out to the shaft to grasp it. Chapter 139, Heading to Academy. Taking a deep breath, he lifted the spear into the air with both hands. It responded to his touch like a living thing, with perfect balance, the weight shifting ever so slightly as he willed it. Amazing, he whispered. Celine folded her hands, watching his reaction with pride. I call it Black Dragon Spear. It may not have a will of its own yet, but its potential is vast. If you keep feeding it mana and improve its rune later, it may very well awaken in time. Black Dragon Spear. Orion repeated, testing the weight runes with a few light sweeps and thrusts beside the table. Despite the narrow space, he moved with ease, and the spear didn't even come close to touching a chair or wall. It was like it moved through the air untouched. Eldrick raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Well damn, she spoiled you again, boy. Celine snorted softly. I simply ensured my grandson won't die swinging a stick. Orion laughed, giving the spear a final spin before placing it inside his inventory and sitting down. Thank you, Grandma. Now I will need to learn spear as well. Celine's eyes softened, her expression warm. I know you can do it. After all, you are the most talented person I have seen. Orion chuckled and nodded his head. Does Uncle Edgar know anything about a spear? Eldrick laughed and shook his head. No, he doesn't know us of spear, no point in looking for him for this. Orion slightly frowned, thinking about where he could find someone to teach him. Celine, seeing him thinking so hard, began to say something. Cough. Eldrick, however, suddenly coughed loudly. I think something got stuck in my throat. He said to the two of them who were looking at him. Orion nodded his head and lowered his head to think. While Celine looked at him weirdly, she clearly understood what the look on his face meant. He didn't want her to help Orion find someone to learn the spear from. She furrowed her brows, but in the end decided to listen to him. The rest of the meal passed with quiet conversation and familial warmth. Orion shared bits of his upcoming plans. When breakfast was over, Orion rose from his seat and adjusted his uniform, adjusting the sword at his waist while checking the spear in his inventory before he made his way towards the exit. Celine watched him go with a warm expression before she turned her head and looked at Eldrick with a questioning look. What was that about? Eldrick stroked his beard. We already had Edgar teach him swordsmanship. Don't you think he should learn to find opportunities on his own? Celine narrowed her eyes in thought. Eldrick continued with a smile, he already knows swordsmanship, so we won't have to worry about his self-defense. But you are making his life unnecessarily hard, she softly said. Eldrick's expression turned serious, we do not know what the future holds for us. In these tumultuous times, it's best to be as prepared as possible. Not like he will stop his sword practice. The two of them continued to discuss some of the recent events. Orion, on the other hand, exited the dining hall with smooth steps as the sunlight greeted him. He stepped out of the estate and onto the marble pathway leading to the front courtyard. Sar the novel, F.ir.at website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Waiting by the luxurious obsidian carriage stood Edgar with his ever-so-calm expression. Beside him, Lucan stood while playing with his pebble with a smile on his face. Edgar noticed him first as he turned around and bowed, "Good morning, young master." "Good morning, young master." Lucan turned around and bowed before playfully saying, "Hope you played enough with your sword yesterday." Orion chuckled and nodded his head, "Yes, it looks like news travels fast in this mansion." "Haha, nothing like that," Lucan quickly shook his hands, "Sir Edgar told me about it just now while idle chatting." Orion let out a soft chuckle before turning to Edgar, "Uncle Edgar, do you know anything about the spear?" "Oh?" Edgar curiously looked at Orion, "You want to learn the spear as well, young master?" Orion nodded his head, "Yes, Grandma made a spear for me as well. It will be a good weapon for mid-range, and I can master it quickly with my talent for learning." Lucan continued to listen to him curiously, while Edgar seriously asked, "Are you sure, young master? A person can take decades or even over 100 years just to pursue one path. It will become much harder if you want different passive weapons when you already have different elements to learn." Orion looked at him in amusement, "I'm a dragon, I got plenty of time to learn all of it, haha. Grandma probably made it for me due to my potential as the human emperor. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing, and since Grandma made that for me, then she also trusts me." He gestured with his hand to drop the topic, "So, anything on this?" Edgar shook his head and spread his hands out, "These hands have ever only held a sword. I don't know anything about spear." "Poor Sir Edgar has never felt the touch of women," Lucan said while wiping his eyes in an exaggerated manner. Edgar's eye twitched, and he began unsheathing his sword. "I dare you to say that again." Cough, Lucan quickly jumped behind Orion and peeked from behind him, "It was a joke, Sir Edgar, a harmless joke." Orion shook his head. "Anyways, do you know anything about the spear, Brother Lucan?" Lucan's eyes lit up as he heard him call him brother. "Ahem, this brother of yours may be useless in other stuff, but I'm a top-tier material for picking up girls from you." "Spears?" "Young master asked for spears, you womanizer." Edgar gritted his teeth and said. Lucan rubbed the back of his head and sheepishly replied, "Ahaha, I'm pretty useless with a spear. I know a bit of swordsmanship only." "Hia." Orion shook his head and boarded the carriage. Edgar followed him inside while giving Lucan the look, "You are dead meat." Lucan chuckled and hopped into the driver's seat. With a quiet crack of the reins and the smooth rumble of wheels, the carriage began its journey down the road toward Thunder Peak Royal Academy. Inside the carriage, Edgar looked at him and took out a small pouch. "Here, young master. You should be low on mana crystals by now. Master told me to give them to you." He handed Orion a bag filled with mana crystals. Orion took them over and looked inside to see 100 high-grade spirit stones. His eyes lit up as he had indeed been running on fumes after spending all of his money on air gotcha. "Master. Mana crystals. So many. We can do 10 draws with them." "Oh hell nah, I'm a poor beggar right now with no money. I'm not yet addicted enough to gambling that I don't even save money for use." "Thanks, Uncle Edgar, I was indeed low on money," he gratefully said. Edgar nodded with a smile and didn't say anything. Chapter 140, Never Caressed a Woman. The grand gates of Thunder Peak Royal Academy stood tall and gleaming in the morning sun, their runic enchantments shimmering faintly like rippling water. The obsidian carriage rolled to a smooth halt outside the academy's gates. Orion pushed open the door and descended from it. The slight jingle of his sword scabbard made him feel at ease. He stood straight and headed for the academy's gates, where the guards were stationed. "Student token," one of them requested politely, holding up a crystal scanner. Orion reached into his spatial ring and handed over the shimmering black and gold token with his name on it, Orion Hellstorm Year 1, Special Grade. The guard's gaze became more respectful after he saw the special grade written on it. He then passed it under the scanner, which flashed green with a soft chime before returning it to him and standing to the side, allowing access. Orion nodded and stepped past the threshold into the academy grounds. The gates scanned him as usual, but he had learned to ignore the sensation as he took in the familiar scenery. A wide path with grass growing on the sides of the stone-paved pathway, while the main building stood majestically at the center. Students in uniform bustled about, some in groups chattering excitedly, others walking alone with focused expressions. "Feels like I've been away longer than 2 days," Orion mused, glancing around with a curious smile. "That's because your life moves at a different pace now, Master." He took a slow stroll through the open paths, the scent of morning dew on mana-infused grass refreshing his senses. Eventually, near the left wing of the main building, he spotted a familiar sight, 2 young women seated on a shaded bench beneath a flowering tree, its blossoms casting a rain of pale pink petals. Arya and Amelia. Arya was gesturing animatedly, clearly mid-sentence, while Amelia listened quietly, her hands resting neatly in her lap. Orion approached with a grin. "Good morning, ladies." Arya looked up first, eyes lighting up. "Brother Orion. You're finally back." Amelia nodded softly in greeting, her golden eyes glancing at the sword strapped to his side with mild interest. "Wasn't he asking why I keep my spear outside my storage ring? And now look at him. Hee, girl, it's a clear sign, he has a crush on you and is trying to impress you. /novel_fire. At website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. You can't fool me this easily, I'm not a child." The 2 of them continued to bicker back and forth. "Sorry I missed the last 2 days, Orion said, sliding onto the bench beside them. "What did I miss?" Arya smirked and waved her hand casually. "Nothing important. After Vice Dean Hargan's class, there haven't been any mandatory lectures. We're free to choose whichever class we want now. Most commoner students are still stuck in the Affinity Rune Theory session since they haven't even started theirs." "Huh, I see." Orion rested a hand on his chin, thoughtful. "I thought the Affinity Rune Theory and Runic Theory classes were mandatory." She nodded her head, "It's no wonder you would think that. After all, most of the students took those classes, even those who have already learned them before. But it was because they wanted to see the knowledge of the Academy's instructors. Now everyone will take whatever classes they prefer." Orion nodded in understanding, then, "Are there any classes on spell creation or its theory?" Arya tilted her head slightly. "Actually, yes. There's an open lecture on spell structure and creation every few days. It's hosted by instructor Mirren. I was thinking of attending today's session." "Perfect," Orion said with a satisfied nod. "Let's go together then." Arya stood up, brushing some petals from her uniform. "Sounds good. I think it starts in about 20 minutes. We should head there early if you want a front seat. There won't be special seats for us since it's an open lecture for all students." Orion nodded and rose alongside her, his eyes drifting to Amelia, who remained seated with her usual calm expression. "You coming too?" he asked. Amelia simply nodded, standing wordlessly and falling in step behind them. "Hee, look at you walking with your little squad, Master, so cool. Everyone needs a little glazer like you in their life. Having you is like having a whole cheerleading squad." Orion inwardly shook his head and praised Lumi for her infectious enthusiasm as the trio walked leisurely toward the lecture hall. The academy grounds were brimming with quiet, excited chatter as students hurriedly walked in different directions, each pursuing their interests and classes of choice. "Master, I mean it. Look at you, already building your own little elite squad. You'll be the talk of the academy in no time." Greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Aren't I already? Orion quipped playfully, eyes sparkling. I seem to recall someone telling me that I'm already famous around here as the elemental freak. Of course. But it's different having your own team walking around you. It makes you look even cooler. Orion chuckled softly, subtly glancing to his right at Arya. The princess moved gracefully, her posture confident, her lavender-scented hair cascading down her shoulders, shining faintly in the sunlight. Despite her delicate features, a fierce intellect glittered behind her bright eyes. Sometimes, just looking at her confident expression, one would forget that she was still only a 15-year-old teen. Emilia walked silently to his left with her usual composed, quiet demeanor. Her calm blue eyes occasionally swept their surroundings, sharp and observant. You know, Lumi, Orion mused thoughtfully, it's not about looking cool. They're talented individuals. They're genuinely reliable allies, not accessories for my image. Hee, as expected of Master. You truly think differently from everyone else. Their relaxed pace soon brought them to the lecture hall's wide-open double doors. The hall was imposing yet elegantly structured, its polished wooden exterior lined with intricate silver runes that faintly shimmered, probably enhancing acoustics and clarity within. Here we are, Arya announced cheerfully, stepping through the grand entrance first. Orion followed, feeling a gentle, almost imperceptible pulse of mana ripple through his senses as he crossed the threshold. All the sounds from the outside stopped as soon as he stepped through. All lecture halls seem to be imbued with soundproof spells. He thought while heading inside. Inside, the lecture hall was impressive as usual. Rows upon rows of polished wooden benches ascended gradually upward from the central platform, providing clear visibility from any vantage point. Intricate mana lamps floated serenely overhead, casting a pleasant, azure illumination upon the expansive room. At the focal point, a slightly elevated platform awaited Instructor Mirren's arrival, set in front of a massive crystal board etched with shimmering runes. They took the front seats, settling comfortably. Orion chose a spot directly facing the platform, Arya naturally sitting to his right and Emilia quietly slipping into the seat beside her. Orion's fingers briefly traced Realm Guardian's hilt, the comforting weight of the weapon putting him at ease. Master, I don't think you have ever caressed a woman this gently. You would be the first person I would kill if you had a physical form. Good thing I don't have a physical form then. Superscript 3. Arya leaned slightly toward Orion, her voice low and teasing, excited? Your first proper class after returning.